Student essays with insane plot twists that the teachers never saw coming. Teaching 8th grade English. A student was writing about a supernatural investigator. About 2/3 through the story, the narrator was listing all of the greatest horror movies he had seen, and the list ended, "I once saw an English teacher named Mr. My Name slough off his skin and devour a classroom of students. It was a great surprise and story." I had a student who was obsessed with silverback gorillas. I mean, everything he wrote was about silverbacks. Even for the most random questions, for example about Shakespeare's sonnets, his answer would somehow quite logically twist around to his gorillas. After a while, he added a character, the Queen of Zanzibar. She controlled this wild and often violent band of gorillas. At the end of that year, I ended up moving away, and at my farewell lunch, he gave me a card which said, "There will never be another story about the silverback gorillas of Zanzibar because the Queen of Zanzibar is moving to Australia." It blew me away. I never thought his stories were analogies of our school or students, or that I'd made that much of an impact on his life. Humbling. When my nephew was 6 or 7 or so, they had to write a description of how to make a sandwich. My nephew proceeded to write a detailed account of how to make a sandwich, which includes getting a mold of a witch and putting wet sand into it. You get the idea. The teacher said in all of her years of teaching that no kid had ever done that. She asked to keep a copy because she thought it was so funny. I had a second language learner who wrote about the death of a close relative. He talked about feelings of extreme sadness and then said, "I've come to know that this feeling is called grief. It was the most heartbreaking thing I've ever read." Teaching middle school. Gave an About Me essay early in the year. One student wrote about how they had a rough home life, parents divorcing. It was very well written and heartbreaking until the last paragraph where he talked about finding a religion in the last year. "I've learned not to judge people who do wrong, because only God can judge, and they will burn." Well, there's a non-zero chance that you were in the prologue sequence of some superhero movie, and this kid was destined to either be the hero or the tragic villain. Not because they seem particularly inclined towards violence, just because that last line is basically the dialogue you end on in the trailer. One of my kids got a writing assignment to write a new ending to a story. It was a classic star-crossed lovers narrative, so I figured they'd do a happily ever after. Nope, the female protagonist ended up using the dude for his knight status to escape the thumb of her father, then killed the knight and went out on her own. I taught an English 101 where I had a very open-ended writing assignment to gauge where the students were. It was a long time ago, but if I remember correctly, it was to write about something that happened in your life that was memorable. Like I said, very vague. One student wrote about how his friend had run away from home and asked to stay in his treehouse. Okay, mild enough. Then it got pretty dark when the student wrote that he was woken up by fire sirens only to find the treehouse was engulfed in flames. Of course, nobody had realized it was occupied. That was over 25 years ago, and I still remember the chill I got when I read it. I was picking up recycled paper for my students with severe disabilities to shred using our machine. The essay we found was about some kid that was going through a very tough time at home. I made a report, and that student is now doing better. A student once wrote a story under the assigned heading of "All That Glitters Is Not Gold." It was a first-person narration, told as a comedy about a mother telling her daughter on her 21st birthday about the night she brought her home from the hospital. The twist was that the mother was talking to herself in what would have been the child's bedroom, but her child hadn't actually made it through the night when they brought her home. This floored me. Really kind of annoying kid, good person, but too much charisma, and he used it to goof off during the class. Regularly pulled 70s as a result of not paying attention. Held a poetry workshop that he opted into. Wrote a poem about his dead parents. I knew he lived with grandma, but not why. And the last line was, "I laugh so I don't cry." And that shattered my heart. One of my middle school students in Korea ended a story about his family with it raining alcohol and snowing nose candy. Everybody freaked out and murdered one another. In the story. I teach high school maths, so the opportunities for stories are more limited. I set an extended assignment on mathematically evaluating what would happen in a zombie outbreak, looking at what happens to the human population based on how fast zombies can turn them, if there's a cure, if zombies can raise from the dead from graves, stuff like that. The last part of the assignment was to model a zombie simulation of your choice, come up with some survival strategies and show mathematically how they helped humans. Most students picked a pop culture zombie style and used that as their inspiration. No problems. At the time, there was a big election going on, so one student decided that anyone under the sway of a particular political party must be a mindless zombie, and recreated the events of the entire election in his mathematical equations. It was a fantastic spin on it that made marking it much more fun. I worked at a bookstore that had a spooky story contest for Halloween, and I'd read a lot of stories by elementary students. And mostly, they read like stories by elementary students. But there was this one. On the first pass, I guess I didn't like it, but when it came back from another reviewer, I happened to read it again. The plot wasn't astounding, it was actually kind of a bad story as far as that goes. What was amazing was that the student changed her vernacular depending on whether the speech was spoken by a character or part of the narration. That's not elementary stuff. It was really incredible and such a small thing that I was so surprised that I'd even noticed it. It's literally a technique that was considered groundbreaking when Zora Neale Hurston did it, and she's one of the greatest American writers ever. There's no way that this little 4th grade girl knew about Hurston. She was just doing it naturally. I was blown away. I tried my best to advocate for that story, even suggest a special prize, and my boss would not give. I hope that little girl is still writing. We were assigned to write a full-length poem in a creative writing class. Our instructor constantly reminded us to avoid cliché symbolism and metaphor. The example he kept bringing up was not to write about wearing all black in a cemetery. Now, I'm terrible with symbolism and metaphor. Every time I try to write symbolically, it always reads back to me as forced or cliché. I wrote and threw out 3 poems and accepted my fate on the day it was due. But that morning, I took out another sheet of paper and titled it, "Wearing All Black in a Cemetery." But it wasn't about death or sadness, rather the main character was dressed in all black because he was a grave robber. The poem had him getting caught and sentenced to life in prison. My instructor loved it. In high school, we had this creative writing assignment where we were given the choice of 3 different pictures to base our stories on. I chose this one where you could see a man cleaning a room, and you could see that he had swept things under the carpet because there was a big lump on it. I wrote this whole thing about the guy panic cleaning before his guests would arrive, and him desperately trying to flatten the lump. In the end, it turned out that the lump was a body, and his guests were the police. Pretty tame, I know, but the way I wrote it, I purposefully made the spelling and grammar mistakes through the text, except that when you read the twist, you realize that they weren't actual mistakes and everything was grammatically correct. My teacher had even noted all of my mistakes with a red pen, but wrote a note basically saying, "Oh, never mind, just read the ending." I showed it to my dad after he got back, and he burst out laughing when he read it through. I had a student write that she flew to California to see Post Malone because he's, quote, "so hot." She got a henna tattoo on her chest of him before the concert. Unfortunately, it turned out she's allergic to henna, and it turned into a terrible rash. She still has the scar. Plot twist, it turned out to be a permanent tattoo. In high school, my class was tasked with writing a 1 to 2 page essay about an unpleasant experience in our lives. So I wrote a 12-ish page, third-person narrative about myself writing the essay. One time in middle school, I wrote a story called Eye Flaps. The story takes place in a society where people can't blink, and the scientist discovers blinking serum, and is so happy he blinks his eyelids off and dies of sleep exhaustion. Years later, my mum told me that the teacher really enjoyed the story and said it had a great twist at the end. I'm still proud of that story to this day. I had a student write an amazing argumentative essay. He was a shy kid and we'd been working on building his confidence and taking risks in his writing. I got to the end of the paper and he noted, "I always wanted to include this argument, but I wasn't sure." He leaves a citation. I go to his works cited and see a proper citation along with a hyperlink. I click it. Rick Astley begins to sing. I wipe away a tear. Well done, kid. Well done. Well, this is my favorite one. Bonus points for leaving it in a piece that sounds like he was going to pass with flying colors anyway. I wonder if that would turn an A+ into a fail for a certain stuffy sort of professor. Good thing that it sounds like he knew your humor. I had to write a new ending to a story about how a white boy, true son, was adopted by an Indian tribe after a raid on his family. The white settlers attacked the Indian tribes years later, found the white kid and brought him back to live with them. In my new ending, the true son considered the tribe to be his real family and escaped to join the survivors. Shortly after, the tribe, along with True Son, ambushed the settlers and slaughtered them in revenge. All seemed well and the tribe were grateful to have True Son back with them. That was until they all started getting an odd rash and dying. Turns out that the True Son had unknowingly brought back smallpox with him and spread it among the tribe. I ended with something that seemed like a very deep line to 12-year-old me about how war is stupid, nobody wins, and everybody loses in the end. Fun note, my teacher actually thanked me for putting so much thought into the assignment and I got an A+. Ultimately, I failed her class because that was legit the only time I ever applied myself and actually turned an assignment in. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I once had an elementary student write a story where John Cena randomly busted into the house about 3/4 of the way into the story. Embedded into a student's analysis one day was the phrase, "I like to suck eggplant." Obviously not the actual wording. I simply wrote, "Please proofread before next submission." The poor kid went bright red when they saw the comment. I knew it was a friend of theirs who had made a sneaky edit, so I gave them no punishment. But we all had a good laugh. Not me, but my dad. He teaches engineering and he was talking to his students about the meaning of different lights in the car. He said that if the check engine light lights up, then you're probably effed. Flash forward to the exam. A student had to recognize the check engine light. He wrote next to the picture, "You're probably effed." I had something similar during job training. Among other things, I had to know the facilities around different train stations, one of them being the wastewater disposal. When my colleague was explaining this, he referred to it as pumping away the poop. A week or so later, I had my exam and was told to just start explaining what was around the station. Eventually, I came to the wastewater disposal, but all I could think of is pump away the poop. Luckily enough, that was exactly the point where my examiner and boss said, "Okay, you obviously know everything that's here. There's no point in going on further with the question." And he started the next question. Phew! We were set a challenge in English literature at high school to rewrite the ending of Mice and Men. Can't remember all the details, but my ending change was that George shoots Lenny, then turns the weapon on himself out of guilt. I then detailed a final scene where a small mouse scurries along the floor and settles in Lenny's hand. I was made to read out the 2 to 3 page ending to the class, and it got used as an example for the next few years in other classes. I think my teacher was surprised that I wrote something with so much thought and detail and actually read the book. I wasn't known for my soft side. I was a bit of a class clown. It was my only ever A+ work at school. A kindergartner I taught in Korea last year wrote this awesome story about a dragon who terrorized all of the forest animals. They all worked together to defeat him, and they had a big party to celebrate. In a true show of forgiveness, the animals even invited the dragon to the party since he apologized for hurting them. But they didn't invite one animal. I can't remember which one, because he was Japanese. At the time, there was a huge political movement in Korea to boycott Japan because of tensions over their refusal to acknowledge the use of Korean comfort women. Read the forced use of colonized people as working girls. This happened before and during World War II. I just didn't expect that out of the blue, and from a 5-year-old either. My teacher was surprised when we were given a short story assignment. What happened was that the assignment stated we had to write a story. It didn't say how long it could be. It just had a minimum. So I wrote a long book full of plot twists, character development, specific explained setting, a theme and moral, a cliffhanger, and just good stuff. It was obviously not the greatest thing ever. It was 8th grade, but I think I did well. I actually became dedicated to it. So the next school year, I memorized my old teacher's birthday, and I spent a long time writing a book on Google Docs. I printed it, bought a blank book cover, and gave her the second volume of the first book, with an ending this time. The book was about a group of Arctic explorers who found a caveman of sorts in the ice, and when they let it out, it released a disease onto the explorers, and then they spread it across the world by accident. The cliffhanger is hard to explain. Once, for a 3 to 5 page essay in the 8th grade, my friend wrote 56 pages. I remember she tried changing the 12-point font to 8-point as if that would help get within range. Yeah, so the teacher stopped reading after 5. My teacher marked exams for the whole country, and she was just responsible for what they only called the pit, aka the ones that had been flagged for social services. She had all sorts, from cases of child mistreatment, like one student had written about her sister's court case, to religious fanatics. She had one that was entirely Allah Akbar. We had to write an ending to a story about a man driving home to his wife. Somewhere in the story, I saw a short mention of the character almost getting into an accident. So I played with that and I made it into a paranormal story where the main character did get into the accident, but his body didn't know it yet. So he got home to his wife, who was just watching the news report of his death, and then he stood in their bedroom with a hole in his body. I was proud of that one. Congratulations to that kid, that's like an M. Night Shyamalan twist, and this young un's writing style is no doubt going to mature and they'll become a way better writer if they keep it up. I mean, it's not hard to be a better writer than M. Night Shyamalan, but I'm just saying for a kid, that's not a bad level. The story itself was fine, but I really didn't expect the giant drawing of a male organ at the end, which also turned out to be a picture of 3 grassy mountains that were not once mentioned in the story. Also did a story circle with a kindy kid that told a very usual story of her going to get ice cream with mummy and daddy, which suddenly ended in, and then I took all of my fingers off and I threw them in the air. I was working in a pre-kindergarten classroom while the teacher was reading some stories that the kids had dictated to her based on a collection of drawings. One child had a story called Empire State Building that she was about to read while I was organizing the refrigerator. The story went, "There's a tornado, all of the people are dead." I had to keep my head buried in the fridge as I was red in the face from trying not to howl with laughter at the most amazing story hook a 4-year-old has ever written. I mean, I took pictures, but I really wish I'd kept the text itself. Would have been interested to ask my English lit teacher what he thought about my writing when I was studying the subject years ago at school, very much against my will. I didn't believe that he'd read my work and just put a few ticks here and there. So I had the idea of making my handwriting increasingly illegible to see if he was actually reading anything. By the end of term, I was still getting the same old tricks and he couldn't have read a word of it. When my son was in the 2nd grade, his teacher gave out the usual coloring page and writing prompt. It was a Halloween theme. There was a smiling child in a costume, holding a bag, and the prompt was, "When I looked inside my trick-or-treat bag, I found," and my child wrote, "a human head." 7 years old and already a master of the horror plot twist. While writing about the magic treehouse tonight on the Titanic, one of my students was writing about the people once they got into the water, and wrote, "The people in the water looked up and saw an incredible sight." And I was expecting it to proceed with how the boat was sitting out of the water at a steep angle or how the propellers were visible as the book describes. Nope, the band was still playing, was what followed. I don't get many big twists since I teach little ones, but that's the one I still like to think about sometimes because it would have been an incredible sight for sure. I really didn't expect what this one kid did with their essay. They turned it in. Our freshman teacher asked us to write a continuation of Mice and Men, so I turned it into a ghost story. The setting is Crooks and Candy having a conversation in the barn. They're talking about George and wondering why he hasn't moved on and why he goes off alone every night. Cindy thinks George is paying Lenny's ghost a visit out at the spot where he died. Crooks confesses that he can't sleep at night because he feels like the ghost of Curly's wife is haunting the barn. My teacher asks to keep the essay. I had a Year 6 student write a multi-chapter love story with a thinly disguised version of herself as the protagonist, who wins the love of her best female friend, who was also a thinly disguised version of the writer's BFF. It was so tender and wistful and sweet that it made me teary. I showed it in confidence to an older teacher who was mentoring me at the time. I felt as though the student was coming out to me, and I was unsure what to do, if anything. A few days later, she came out to her family, who were very supportive. I don't know how the situation went with the crush on the BFF. They both went off to high school shortly after, so I don't know if anything eventuated. In middle school, like 7th or 8th grade, for our final exam we were given a choice of essays. All the topics were extremely boring and I hated all of them, but the last one was a picture of a carnival, and my mind kind of fixated on that for some reason. We were supposed to look at the picture and write an essay on it of any kind. Obviously, they were looking for something lame and family-friendly, and my edgy self would not let that fly. So I went full psycho and wrote a carnival of horrors kind of macabre tale full of screaming kids and psycho clowns. I think the end of the story had kids flying from the roller coaster into never-ending darkness, and I remember describing in graphic detail the fear that these kids had. Now, this was the final exam, so we never got our papers back for final exams, just the scores, and it was highly unusual to ever receive any kind of critique on your work because we'd already moved on to the next grade by the time the results were out. This was in India. Suffice to say, I was shocked to hear that my old English teacher wanted to meet me. Obviously, I walked to her office in trepidation, expecting a reprimanding for the story. Instead, I was met with a smile, and my teacher saying that it was simultaneously the most horrifying and the best short story she had read in a while. Long story short, she ended up recommending me for essay contests, and I fell in love with writing. Still super grateful for the opportunity she gave me. Could have been a real bad ending to this story. Student wrote a fairly dark short story about being knifed and laying on her floor, bleeding out while the police came in to arrest the perpetrator, or something like that. She wrote it with a fountain pen. It's a thing we do in my classes, and used this really weird ink. When I asked her about the ink, she said it was blood that she had collected from when she was actually knifed. She wrote the whole damn story in her own blood. Teaching English to a class of 3-year-old Thai children. One boy was particularly bright and was managing to write CVC and CVCC words, consonant-vowel-consonant and consonant-vowel-consonant-consonant words. He calls over to me and shouts, "Look, I can write!" And he proceeds to write, C, okay, well done, U, great, N, T. What does it say, teacher? Parents, what's the most messed up thing you've caught your kid doing? My wife was driving our then 3-year-old back from her aunt's house to eat lunch. She noticed him cram something in his mouth and start chewing, and she asked him what he was eating. No response. Thinking he might be choking or something, she brakes hard, pulls over to the side of the road, yanks the back door open and grabs a French fry out of his mouth. Now, they'd been to McDonald's several days before and the car had been cleaned since then, so she looks high and low to see where it came from. She gets suspicious and takes the cover off his car seat. Lo and behold, there's about a dozen stale French fries in the folds of the plastic car seat. Far too many to be accounted for by random drops. The kid was stashing them for later, like a squirrel. This is tame by comparison to some of the other stories here, but here it is. When my son was about a year old, I found him stuffing his pants pockets full of Vaseline, scooping it out with his hands. Really makes me wonder why little kids' clothes even have pockets. I was dressing my 4-month-old son the other day. His trousers had pockets on them. Like, what the heck does a 4-month-old need pockets for? My 4-year-old daughter used to stash steak knives in strategic locations around the house. My neighbor busted her doing it. I didn't believe him until he pulled out a 6-inch carving knife from behind a bookcase. With the right mentor, your daughter will grow up to be an amazing badass. My friend who worked in a residential treatment facility once found a kid who'd stuck a paperclip into an electrical outlet and was lying on the floor looking at it. When asked what he was doing, the kid replied, "Every time I touch this with my tongue, I wet my pants." I read that in Ralph Wiggum's voice from The Simpsons. My daughter cramped in a box and gave it to my son as a present in front of our whole family. I guess no one really caught her as she was obviously and openly trolling. Pretty messed up, I didn't even know what to say to that. I caught my son, 7, and his best friend, 9, drawing clown faces on each other's butt cheeks and with the plans of tooting in each other's faces. I mean, yeah, it's gross, but it's also objectively hilarious and weirdly cute, not that I can put my finger on why. One of the less messed up things in this grouping by far. A few weeks ago, my 4-year-old said she had to pee. She was in the bathroom for maybe 5 minutes when we start hearing her gag, so I tell her dad to go and check on her. He walks in and she quickly throws a huge log back in the toilet and tries to hide her doo-doo-covered hands. When he asked her why she was playing with her caca, she said she wanted to see how squishy it was. Ugh. I did this once when I was a kid. It stuck to my hands, obviously. I was not pleased and never did it again. Friend's daughter once said pretty loudly in a bus, "Look, Daddy, Uncle's beard looks like Mom's pee-pee." I lived in a condo when I was a kid. The family living above us had a girl my age, who I played with in a small forest bordering our backyard from time to time. She used to pick up these big black slugs from the ground and lick the thick black slime off of them, like completely savoring every drop. She thought it was yummy and would easily do a dozen slugs in one sitting. Her parents discovered it, and needless to say, we were not allowed to play in the forest anymore. Walking in on my son flirting on Omegle. He was 7 at that time. The youngest one, age 5 at the time, stuck multiple quarters in the skin of his pee-pee and showed my best friend his change dispenser impersonation. It was hilarious and deeply weird. My son went through a phase where he would wake up from his nap, unbeknownst to us, take off his diaper and smear his doo-doo all over his room. It'd be on his bed, the walls, the windows, his toys. Worst of all, there would be places where it looked like he'd rubbed it into the carpet with all his might. I wish I could say this only happened once. We also caught him tasting and eating his own boom boom more than once. My son did that for a year. Every day after his nap, I would take a deep breath, say a prayer that maybe this day my nightmare would be over, and walk into his room to see him covered in brown, with smears all over his crib, the walls, and himself. I tried putting footy PJs on him and safety pinning the zipper up, safety pinning the pants and a shirt together on him, cutting the feet off those PJs and putting them on backwards. I seriously thought about duct taping that damn diaper on him. Eventually he grew out of it, but I nearly lost my mind. I'm just so glad that I'm not alone. Anyone I talk to seems to think that no toddlers ever do this. I have twins, and one is the great poopy Picasso, and the other one is unfortunately getting crap thrown at him like it's a monkey war zone. A few days ago, I came in because I heard them playing instead of napping. Scat everywhere. I got them in the shower, got all the sheets and pillows in the wash, scrubbed everything, added new sheets, got the kids back in the crib. Picasso has taken off his diaper and done it again. He has no sheets right now. Just why? I was babysitting my friend's children, probably aged around 5 and 7 back then, and I caught the daughter, the 5-year-old, following her brother into the bathroom when he wanted to pee. The kids then informed me that she does it all the time because she likes to run her fingers in the stream of pee and then lick them because it's yummy. My daughter is not even 3, but she put a box of nerds down her diaper and stated that she was a rattle toy. Uncle to a rambunctious boy. When he was around 2, we found him laying around with a dog, English bulldog. Neither seemed like anything was wrong except for the dog jingling. My nephew had stuck my brother's car keys up the dog's butt, like all the way to the plastic knob. The dog seemed unfazed, and my nephew seemed proud that he had found the keyhole to start the dog. My friend used all the olive oil to tickle his pickle with. His parents never caught him, but his mum figured it out and told him to use lotion because it was cheaper. Something extra virgin. I have an 8-year-old son who has sleepovers with the kid down the block. I came downstairs and one had his head under the other's blanket. After the typical, "What the frick are you guys doing?" I found out they have a game where they smell one another's toots. I thought it was weird, then I remembered the same scene from Biodome. Not my kids, but babysitting my twin cousins recently. They're 5. They were arguing about something during a snack, and the boy twin suddenly got eerily calm. He goes into her bedroom, gets the terrarium for her anoles, the lizards you find in your gardens, and takes it outside. She starts screaming bloody murder. I'm completely confused. He turns to her through the glass door and proceeds to smash the tank against the ground. Just windmills his arms and wails the tiny box against the cement. No fluctuation in his emotion. I ran out to stop him, but the 5 or so little lizards in the tank were dead. I looked back at the other twin and she was sobbing into her hands. He just walked past her and sits down to continue eating his snack. My aunt told me that was the 3rd time he's done that. Your aunt should frickin' do something about his behavior. This kind of emotional stuff is going to destroy the other twin. Agreed. And 1, he's harming animals, and 2, this isn't ripping up a drawing, this is a seriously violent act. Me and my 5-year-old son at the urinals. He's arguing that his pee-pee is bigger. It was at a hockey arena, so there were about 40 dudes laughing their butts off. Were they laughing because his was bigger? You were there, weren't you? My daughter, when 15 and heavily in piercings and death metal, decided to brand herself with a star shape on her arm. I didn't realize till the next day, still no idea how she managed the shape or not to scream. She still has the scars. Cripes, I did some pretty stupid stuff to try and change up my look when I was a kid, but never quite got around to branding myself with a presumably homemade, star-shaped red poker. I'm sweating just thinking about it. My youngest of 3 had just started walking. One day I found her hanging onto the bathroom toilet. I walked in and to my surprise, saw her with a handful of soggy toilet paper. Right as I scream her name, that little baby's hand reaches up into her mouth and she begins chewing it. One of my older kids forgot to flush and I panicked, having never experienced this with her bro or sis. I called poison control. They assured me that children ingest fecal matter often and she may have a stomachache but will be fine. Another time, same kid mind you, we're walking into a grocery store. I look down and say, her name, "Where did you get that gum you're chewing?" Her reply was, "On the ground." Ugh, she's by far my most disgusting child. My kids were pretty tame. I had one son scotch tape himself to the floor. I think he liked the sound of the tape coming off. Same son also built scotch tape footbridges between the countertops. My daughter snuck out one night and a friend who works nights saw her and called us. We were waiting on her bed when she climbed back in the window. God, that was a great parenting moment. My dad caught my sister sneaking back into the house with a ladder. "Why don't you just take the stairs?" was the only question he asked her. Those are the worst, when you know you're in deep crap but the parents don't sound mad. The uncertainty of your fate drives you crazy. Not a parent, but I've caught my younger brother, aged 3 to 5 at the time, on a stepping stool peeing into the air conditioning unit. I didn't so much catch him at it, it was more like he was doing it at me. He's 4 years old and we were having a bedtime battle where he simply wouldn't be quiet or stay in bed. He can really dig in his heels sometimes. I was getting really angry for the fourth or fifth time that night, and I walked up to his doorway to tell him he needed to be quiet. He was ready for me with his pants off, his ankles up to his ears, and his butthole pointed directly at the doorway. He heard me when I stopped dead in my tracks, and he looked between his legs at me with pure hate in his eyes. I gently told him to pipe down and went back to my room. I come back one more time for the same reason, and this time he was in the same position except he was sticking his finger in his butt, at me, hatefully. He just sat there wordlessly mean-mugging me with his finger in his butt. That was probably the most messed up crap I've caught my kid doing. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to have a roommate that would help me with watching my daughter, even during times where I just needed a nap. One day I was napping and my roommate was watching my daughter, but my daughter headed back to her room. She didn't come out for a while, so my roommate went looking for her. She found my daughter in my room, standing over me with a toy knife, bringing it down over and over, whispering, "Stab, stab, stab, stab." My son was 5 and had started playing Skyrim on the Xbox 360. One afternoon, the neighbor called and asked if I could watch her son, also 5, for a few hours. They played with swords, shields, Nerf guns, typical boy games. At one point, I stopped hearing them. That's always a dangerous thing with any child. You know something is going down. I opened the door very quietly and saw them on the floor. My son was now wearing his friend's shirt and pants, and the other boy was down to only his underwear. My first thought was, what the frick? But my son looked up at me with a sword in his hand and said, "We're playing Skyrim, and I just killed him, so I'm taking his stuff." All I could say was, "Okay, but let's try and keep all of our clothes on from now on." Well, from about the age of 2 to 5, I had a flock of imaginary ducks that used to follow me around. Apparently, we had to wait a good minute or so each day when getting into the car so all of my duck friends could come along. When asked about them, I would say that I am their king and they are here to follow me. But apparently it started getting weird when I'd pretend to break up fights between the ducks and cry when one died. Yep, I was a bit messed up. My brother hated bugs. We had cacti in our front yard. He would cut their heads off and skewer them all over the cacti, or he would take their heads and put their wings in their body where their heads would be. Vlad the Exterminator. Sent the boys to bed with popcorn for a fun treat. I heard maniacal laughter shortly thereafter. Go upstairs to find one of them sticking popcorn betwixt his cheeks and farting so it came out. Asked what was going on, and both boys in a panic tried to eat the evidence as mother and I watched horrified. Walked into the bathroom to find my son trying to put a piece of doodie back up his butt because he thought his heart fell out. Not my kid, but my friend went back to pick up his little brother from his friend's house and no parents were home, so he walked up and found his brother and his friend holding each other's wee-wees. My friend is a 3rd grade teacher. He came to school one morning after having been out sick for a day and found that his classroom only had girls. Turns out all the boys had been suspended the day before for teabagging each other during recess. Walked in on my kid torturing an action figure with a lighter. "Where are your rebel friends now? Ha 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 ha." That's not that uncommon, I guess. My friends and I did weird crap like that when we were kids. Like one time, we made a parachute for an action figure out of a shopping bag and some string, and then we taped a firecracker to his butt, lit it, and threw him on the floor of a 4-story building. Just because. Kids are strange. Reading this, I'm thinking kids are dangerous psychopaths who shouldn't be allowed alone with pets. Apparently, when I was little, I ran off in the buff towards the local golf course. I was also caught making my butthole breathe in front of the mirror. Oh, and I picked up my little sister by the head. I mean, the streaking at the golf course is just hilarious and kind of normal for kids, I think. The other two, a little weird but still not out of the ordinary. I have to assume the sister was okay for the author to post this. This is less messed up than just funny, but my cousin entered the bathroom to find her 2-year-old boy had covered himself in Mummy's stickers. They weren't stickers, they were Kotex pads. And yes, there are photos. I finally remember a birthday party at my then-girlfriend's family when her 5-year-old cousin came down the stairs from the bathroom, happy as a clam and announcing to the world, "Mommy, I stuffed cotton balls into my butt just as you always do." Mommy was not happy with her son. I'm getting a vasectomy. I caught my daughter putting Tic Tacs in her butt because she wanted her next number 2 to smell good. My mum caught my little brother descaling their brand new goldfish at the kitchen table. It was disturbing from what I hear. Son here. You know those furious whack-offs you sometimes do purely to get your fun stick to settle down? Well, yeah, I'd been cooking cookies, listening to music. Nobody was home, so I thought, 1 minute till the cookies are done. I can do this. And I basically lay on the floor and furiously spanked the mule with all my might. Finished. Opened my eyes and behold my mum, arms full of shopping, in the doorway. We didn't speak for a while and I avoided eyesight. When I discovered you could download adult flicks on Kazaa, I skipped school. Turns out my sister skipped her last class and came home early. She walked in on me. Months later, I stupidly entered her room without knocking and I caught her in the act. She yelled out, "Now we're even!" I guess she was right, but I still feel that was a weird thing to say. I've been told on numerous occasions about how when I was 3 or 4, as my parents and I were walking out of the old spaghetti factory, I turned to a table that had a black family in it, with a little black boy about my age, and I excitedly exclaimed, "Look, it's a basketball baby!" My parents told this story of when I was about 3 or 4. My sister was playing in her room one day and apparently came across a spider in her toy chest. Being a 5 to 6-year-old, she lost her mind and started screaming. That's when I supposedly learned what my life's calling was. As the story goes, I come barging into my sister's room and yell, "Don't worry, I'll hypnotize it with my wee-wee," and promptly dropped my pants. My dad laughed, my mother cried, and I defeated the spider. Not a parent, but my friend's little brother, who was 5 or 6 at the time, would strip down and chase me through the house with a kitchen knife. I was terrified of hanging out with my friend because of this. So after it happened 2 or 3 times, and one time his older brothers attacked me while wearing the Scream costume, I decided I wasn't going to his house anymore. My 3-year-old son asked this random woman in a store if she was scared in the fire. He said, "I saw you burning, but I couldn't help you." The woman turned as white as a sheet and explained to me that she had been in a terrible house fire when she was little, 50 years ago. It burned her hands and legs very badly. I was very creeped out at the time. I'm still not sure what the frick happened there. I don't know if it's messed up, but it messed me up a bit. Not a parent, but an older brother. When my younger sister's twins were about 2 or 3 years old, they filled the bathtub up with hot water, using only the red side of the 2 knobs, and took off their diapers and threw them in the tub. I heard from my mum that they inflated to huge dimensions. Oh, and the time one of them put an entire roll of toilet paper in the toilet, effectively clogging it. My sisters do weird crap together. My 3-year-old son figured out how to take selfies with an old iPad we had. Wife thought I'd be teed off. The pictures were hysterical, but not safe to show others. I wiped that iPad pretty fast, as it would be tough to explain the pics to people. Funny because he was all calm in the pictures. Batman undies, just one leg in, halfway up his leg as he posed for the camera. It was as though he knew exactly how he wanted to look in them. Not bad by any stretch, but my almost 2-year-old daughter has a sheep comfort toy that she loves. Can't go to sleep without him. Whenever she's upset, she just calls for him. Came home to the sheep's disemboweled husk. Apparently he had a small tear, and she went to town on him. I hate to think what she'd do to someone she hates after seeing what she did to her best friend. Happy ending though, I managed to stitch him up good as new. I used to enjoy tickling my pickle in the shower with a rubber on, and once I left the used rubber behind and my mum found it. Awkward conversation after when I had to explain that I didn't even have a girl over. When I was a kid, like 5, I went through a phase where I'd convinced myself I was the only real person in the world, and that my parents, teachers, and friends were all just constructs in my own world that I created. I remember saying stuff to my mum and teacher along the lines of, "You can't do anything to me that I don't want you to do. I made you." I remember thinking at the time that it was strange that I would choose to have one of my constructs punish me. I decided that I was doing it because life would get boring if it was too easy. I eventually got over all this. I caught my 1-year-old with something in her mouth. By the time I said to her, "What do you have?" she'd crunched on it a few times and then spit it out. I went over to investigate and was horrified to see that she'd spit out a lizard head. A fricking lizard head in her mouth. Ugh. I guess the cats brought it in and ate the rest of it. She just happened to find the head before I saw. Nasty. Not a parent, but when I was helping my 9 years younger sister clean her room, I found a pouch where she was storing dead flies. Not my kids, but me. I dumped all of my mum's medicine in the car vents. When my mum saw me with empty medicine bottles, she freaked out and took me to the hospital, assuming I ate them all. My brother shot me with a bow. He also tried to stab me several times, succeeding in many of them. To be fair, I did tie him to cinder blocks and throw him in the pool, also hanged him upside down from a tree, buried him alive in a plywood coffin for a bit. He smacked my legs with a baseball bat for that one. Good times, good times. Are you and your brother Wednesday and Pugsley Adams by any chance? My grandma tells me a story about how my uncle threw himself down the stairs in the morning so he wouldn't have to go to school. Grandma took him to the hospital, got a cast on his arm, fed him, and then dropped him off at school. What was your craziest, "I thought about it and it happened" story? When I was 17, a friend and I were driving around town in his 80-something Toyota Tercel. This car was a total piece of crap and had had a seriously loud knock in the engine for weeks. We had been out tooling around for maybe an hour and the knocking noise was getting to me. We're sitting at a red light in the center of a 3-lane road about 20 minutes from home when I exclaimed, "Wouldn't it be some crap if this piece of crap car just went bang and blew the hell up?" As the light turns green, my friend chuckled and said something like, "Yeah, that would suck." The car in front of us starts to move and my buddy pushes the gas and bang! That piece of crap threw a piston and died right in the middle of the road. He looked at me like, "What the frick did you do that for?" And we both laughed our butts off for a few seconds. We pushed his car into a nearby church parking lot with the help of a few onlookers and took the plates off and left it there. That was over a decade ago, and as far as I know, he never heard another thing about it. No idea what eventually became of that car. I worked at a Starbucks in a Lucky grocery store. We had a guy that would come in 4 to 5 times a week and get a small coffee. We'd give it to him for the refill price, and he'd sit in the store for hours. He was homeless and smelled pretty bad and was pretty scruffy looking with long hair and a beard, but he seemed nice enough. After like a year of this, the store manager came to me and told me that if I saw Nathan, the homeless guy, to call the store manager because he wanted to talk to him. That night I had a dream that I was at work and Nathan was there as well, but as an employee. Nothing super eventful about the dream until I went to work the next day and saw we had a new employee. He was sitting at the table in front of the Starbucks kiosk and one of my coworkers was talking to him. I didn't really pay much attention until my coworker called me over and said, "Doesn't he look completely different without his beard?" Mind blown. Apparently, my store manager figured out that if he was going to be chilling in the store all day, he might as well give him a job. He bought him some clothes, got him a haircut and a shave, a gym membership for showers, and started helping him look for a place to stay. I never really had a positive or negative opinion on the store manager before that point, but mad respect for that. 5 years later, Nathan still works there. He outlasted me. A few years ago, I was going to the grocery store with my dad and I asked him, "Is there any part of the body that can't get cancer?" "I don't know, we'll have to look it up later." Later, getting back into the car, we turn on the radio. It's Tuesday, which means it's time for our trivia fact of the week. The lens of the eye is the only body part that cannot get cancer. I really thought that story was going to end with one of you getting cancer of the right buttock or something. Me too, commenter. I was honestly kind of dreading whatever the outcome here was, but this is much better. I would never believe the story had happened if I wasn't present for it. When I was in high school, me and a buddy were driving back from Long Beach with his mum. About halfway home, this butthole starts riding his mum's rear bumper. She gets really nervous and tries to get out of his way by changing lanes. The jerk guns it and changes lanes around her, scaring the crap out of us and nearly forcing her into the center divider. Well, he gets in front of us and slows the frick down to like 1 mile per hour higher than we're going, and my friend's mum is almost in tears and is just screaming, "What the frick, butthole?" So my buddy goes, "Don't worry about it, Mom. We'll all laugh our butts off when he blows his tire and wrecks his car right now." The words had barely left his mouth when, boom! His left front tire completely blows and he tanks his crappy Nissan right into the K-rail. We had to swerve to avoid hitting him. Needless to say, it was an eerie ride home. Watching Jeopardy, the final Jeopardy subject was science. During the commercial break, I said, "I bet it's tungsten." The answer was tungsten. I had this at a pub quiz once. The quizmaster explained that in the next round each question would be a line from a song and the answer was the next line of the song. Before a single line was read out, I wrote, "Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality," in the answer space for question 1. I was right. I had a recurring dream when I was a little kid. I would be sitting on my dad's shoulders and would be walking down this really narrow hallway. For some reason, I had this inherent knowledge that there were monsters in it, but my dad kept them away. The dream always ended before we got out. When I was 5, I had the same dream except we got to the end of the hallway and my dad just suddenly disappeared. I looked for him for a while but to no avail. I woke up and found out he had died while I was sleeping. When I was 11, my grandpa had been sick for a while, and he was in the hospital. One weekend, I was at a friend's place about an hour and a half from home. Everything was fine, but I suddenly just knew something wasn't right. I called my mom, and she assured me that everything was fine, and my grandpa was stable. I still convinced my friend's mom to drive me home right away though, and I made her drive me to my grandparents instead of home. Sure enough, when I got there, my whole family was there, and my grandpa had just passed away. I found out afterwards that when I'd called my mom, it had just happened about 5 minutes before, but she didn't want to break the news to me over the phone. When I was in first grade, we were playing a Jeopardy-style game with actual buzzers. The rules of the game were that if you buzz in too early, you have to answer the question anyway and don't get another chance at it. Well, a question had just finished, and it was that transition period between questions. As soon as the teacher was about to say the first word of the next question, I hit my buzzer unknowingly. My teacher stopped herself from reading the question and looked at me for an answer. I said, "Triangle." I was right. I was about 6 years old and playing with my brand new pet bunny rabbits that my dad bought for me after church. I turned to him and said, "Daddy, I'm glad that you and Mummy are still married. So many of my friends' parents are divorced." My dad responds, "Actually, there's something we need to talk about." And that's how I learned my parents were getting divorced. I fell in love with a girl freshman year of college, and we were together until the end of sophomore year. We reached a breaking point because she came from a very traditional Indian family, and she was very in favor of being married young. I loved her like crazy, but at the same time I knew I wasn't ready for all that she was hoping for, and I didn't think it was fair to keep getting her hopes up that way. I was 20 years old and I'd never had a job for God's sakes. It was a brutal breakup because as much as I tried to explain myself, any girl will take that as a rejection, as saying somehow that she wasn't good enough. We were both pretty heartbroken, but we realized eventually that trying to be friends would only make things harder, so we agreed to not talk anymore. One of the last things I said that it wasn't impossible for it to work out someday, but we both needed to try and live on our own for a while and give a chance for being with other people. We were both kind of over-dependent on each other, and we both needed to mature and learn to be our own person. We lost touch for 2 years, saw each other very rarely, and spoke not at all. We dated other people. At the end of senior year, I'd just gotten out of a really bad relationship where I'd been cheated on. It wasn't that bad because I wasn't really in love with the girl, but it still felt crappy. The week before exams, I had a dream about the old girl where we ran into each other at this little coffee shop we always used to go to and read and hang out in. In the dream, all we did was talk and hold hands a little. The next day, I picked up the books I needed to study and went to that coffee shop. 15 minutes later, she walked in and sat down without seeing me. She was studying too. I walked up to the counter and brought another drink and looked over just to be sure it was her. I couldn't believe it. She saw me, and of course at that point it was impossible not to say hello. We talked for 2 hours. She had had some bad relationships too. We found out we had gotten jobs in the same city. We didn't hold hands because that would have been bizarre, but we could both feel it. Dated, married, been together 5 years. I don't believe in God, but I still can't believe how perfectly things worked out. A lot of these are about speaking disasters or tragedies into existence, or coincidences of those nature, so it's nice to get another cute one in. When I was 14 or 15, I was sitting with this girl I'd just started hanging out with. We're waiting for our ride home, and she talks about missing her brother, and I said something about him showing up for Christmas, not realizing he was very estranged, 3 years, from the family. Awkward moments ensue, we get rides home, no big deal. Flash forward to 7 a.m. Christmas morning, she calls me freaking out because he showed up at the family door. The first laptop I ordered arrived a day early when I was out of the house, so I came home to find the little slip on my door saying they'd try again tomorrow. The next day I woke up only to find that I'd slept in and missed the shipment again. I was pretty annoyed, but just set my alarm for the next day. For some reason, I missed the FedEx guy for the 3rd day in a row and I'm just fuming. I decide to go for a run to vent my anger, and while running I think to myself, wouldn't it be awesome if I saw the FedEx truck and got my laptop? After half an hour, I turn the corner of an intersection and see the FedEx truck and the FedEx guy walking towards it. I excitedly dash up to him and explain my situation to him while gasping for air. He remembers the package, finds it, and then hands it to me after I sign for it. Such a good day. Sitting in class, Professor pulls up Windows Media Player to play us a video on improper call signaling. He pauses with the mouse hovering over Resume Previous Playlist button, and I think, oh crap, what if it's adult flicks? That'd be hilarious. Turns out it was more than just that. It was some intense butt action with a ridiculously huge marital aid. I laughed very hard. My friend showed me a picture of his new girlfriend. I told him, damn, Ronald, once she realizes she's too hot for you, it's over, man. She broke up with him the next day. He has looked at me accusingly ever since. sitting at lunch with some change. I asked my friend, how many times on average do you think I'd have to toss these coins for them to all land on heads? I had about 7 or 8 coins. He starts getting into the math required and thinking out loud about it. I comment, I bet it's just 1, and I tossed the coins. They all end up heads. Yeah, I was right. It was only 1. During post-party night walking, I told a friend who was walking on the empty road, "You're going to die." For the first time in his life, he listened to me, did a step to his left, and got back to safety. 2 seconds later, a car traveling at more than 130 kilometers per hour came out from nowhere and plowed through the space he had been standing in 2 seconds prior. Final Destination 6. I mean, he's still gonna die now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was about 8. My teacher had asked me to deliver an envelope of some sort to the principal's office in the middle of the school day. My school had at its center a single long hall, with my classroom near one end and the principal's office at the other. As a child, the hall seemed absurdly long, like a mile. Class was in session, so I was walking down this hall all alone, my footsteps echoing, quite surreal. It suddenly occurred to me that I was walking quite close to one wall, and that if a teacher were to fling open their doors, I'd be knocked silly. Just then, a teacher flung open her door, knocking me silly. These were big, old, heavy doors, and the energy transfer to my head was significant. In my memory, both my feet left the ground, though this seems unlikely in retrospect. I landed on my butt and was momentarily stunned. Our eyes locked, the teacher's and mine, for an instant, then I burst out laughing uncontrollably. The synchronicity struck me as hilarious, even the pain of being cold-cocked by a massive school door couldn't suppress my hilarity. I believe my reaction led the teacher to believe I'd suffered brain damage. It took quite some time to convince the various concerned school officials that I was unharmed, if silly. I was talking with a group of friends outside of an Expendables show in Santa Cruz. We were smoking cigs and making jokes when one of my buddies gets our attention and says, "Watch this, I'm gonna pull this girl's shirt down with my mind." He made a funny concentrating face and we all laughed and looked at the girl about 15 feet away from us on the porch. She was mid-conversation with what looked like a good friend, who was male, and slowly but surely her loose top slid over. With each hand motion or exclamation, her top inched over slightly. After about a minute and a half, her right fun chest bit was fully exposed. We cheered and laughed and couldn't believe it. The guy who was talking to her noticed but was too embarrassed to say anything. She finally put it away when some chick from a nearby table made a comment about it so loud that she took notice. But she was standing there with one of her tots out for a good few minutes. By the end of it, everyone on the porch was looking at it. She was a really hot girl with a great mid-sized rack, so I guess that happens a lot. People staring. I kind of felt bad because she got really embarrassed, but wow, it was funny. In college, I was watching Eurotrip with my buddy. The Pope had been sick, and during the part where they make Vatican City think the Pope is dead, I turned to my friend and said, "Man, wouldn't it be weird if the Pope died while we were watching this?" His time of death was almost exactly then. I found out the next day. In short, I killed Pope John Paul II. Wait until the Catholics hear about this one. You're in for it, Buster. Every time I say, "I thought, insert celebrity name here, was dead," they die 3 days later. Unfortunately, I have to actually believe they were dead. I've said I thought Tom Cruise was dead about 7 times and nothing has happened. I'm really sorry about Johnny Cash, though. Quickly, someone convince this person that James Corden is dead. Stat! Oh, I'm kidding. Mostly. Not really pre-thought or said, but it was the craziest thing ever. My friend and I were at Fridays, and he was being super rambunctious and obnoxious while eating his salad. For some reason, he thought it would be a good idea to poke a tomato with his fork and then fling it at me as hard as he could. Drawing his fork up past his shoulder, my friend seriously whipped his tomato across the table with all his might. My first reaction was to sort of turn my head, anticipating the thwack sound the wet vegetable would make as it hit me. But that sound never came, there was no sudden thud, and no tomato hit me. I sat there, fork in hand, wondering what the frick happened. Somehow, that giant hunk of tomato had zoomed across the table and stuck itself onto my fork in the exact same way it was on his. Had we been professional lacrosse players planning the perfect pass, we could never have executed it as flawlessly as had happened. It was the most beautiful demonstration of Newtonian physics my then 17-year-old self had ever experienced. And yes, a tomato is a fruit. I made an error. But guess what? I'm not changing the story. Went to college and worked at a grocery store in Bellingham, Washington State. My co-workers and I were talking in the break room before a shift and the subject of celebrities came up. We talked about how celebrities might be a-holes because they had to deal with sycophants constantly bothering them. Then someone brought up Ryan Stiles, who lives near Bellingham and is owner of the Upfront Theatre, and how he would never shop at the store by the college campus, probably because he doesn't want to be hassled by college noobs. After our conversation, we left to go to our check stands, and within a few minutes, Ryan Stiles walks in. Unbelievable. Regular guy, wears blue jeans, sneakers, and a casual shirt. Really nice too. I was hoping I'd get to help him just to see if he would say something funny, but my friend did instead. About 7 years ago, I was still in high school and living with my mum, my brother, and my younger sister. My parents got a divorce about a year and a half before, and my dad kind of screwed us. My mum was unemployed, but going back to school with less than a year of schooling left. She was 48 at the time. We had no money, no food, no nothing. We've always been a poor family growing up, so it wasn't anything new. Unfortunately, we couldn't live where we were living anymore and had to move. This was the first move without my dad, so it was kind of the toughest. I remember day after day, my mum would cry wondering how she would feed us, move the house, care for us, get money for bills and other things. I remember asking her what we were going to do or how we'd pay for anything. She had no answer. She went to get the mail a day after. She always avoided the mailbox because of bills, and when she did, she found a letter with a check in it for $6,000. She was employed at an insurance firm where she'd met my dad some 20 years earlier, and as a perk for working there, you're given stock options. My mum forgot about the stock options, and they tracked her down 20 years later to give her the money, and single-handedly saved us from being homeless. My mum made that $6,000 go a long way. We happily moved to a cheaper home, and everything is okay again. We were at a poker table playing poker once, and I was winning $100 to $150 from my mates. The dealer was next to me, and he was like, "Man, you're totally cheating." He was joking, of course. He was dealing the community cards, and I was like, "Next card is the 3 of spades." Next card was the 3 of spades. Best moment ever. When I was a kid, every time I thought about a certain episode of The Simpsons, it was the one that would come on that evening. For example, I would imagine a scene or joke from the one where Lisa gets braces, and it would come on. I thought I was psychic, but I never could use my power for good. Sometimes I pretend like I have a bazooka. This happens when I'm in the car with my girlfriend on our frequent and boring 4-hour trips to home and back from college. Well, one time I shot my imaginary bazooka at a car in front of me. A second later, his tire blows out and he swerves off to the shoulder, staring at me all the while. He was probably as confused as I was. When I was about 8 or 9, my family went for a walk, driving our huge 15-passenger red van to the path. Mind you, this is a small walking path in the middle of nowhere that no one knows about except for our family and a few quad riders. For some reason, when my dad closed the door of the van, I got terrified that someone would steal our car. Obviously, none of my older brothers or sisters wanted to listen to a whining 8-year-old. After the walk, we came back and, as guessed, the van was gone. Disappeared. After filing a report with the local cops, we got rides back home and waited. Turned out the thief just needed a way to drive a few friends to an amusement park. The van was found a week later in the parking lot of Kennywood. One night I was stargazing while being outside for a smoke and saw a shooting star between 2 prominent landmarks. A few days later, I was outside again at the same spot and I remembered the shooting star and thought how cool it would be to see it again. A few seconds later, a shooting star crossed that same spot. Oh, and one time I predicted a joke on 2.5 Men. That isn't that hard though. You're not wrong. I don't think I saw a single funny or original joke in the one time I was subjected to that awful show. Come at me, haters. One time about 10 years ago, my buddy and I were about 15 or 16 at the time. We were standing on his front lawn waiting for my mum to pick me up when we heard a guy screech his tires and spin out on the top of the road leading to his house. Looked like he was trying to do donuts. We both looked up there thinking it was a car accident about to happen, but it was nothing, so I said, I got excited. Would have been great to see that guy crash into a pole, for some cheap laughs. This guy couldn't have been moving faster than 10 miles an hour, so it would have ruined his day and nothing more. The guy straightens out and drives down the hill and then completely loses control of his car and slams it into a telephone pole about 30 feet from where we were standing. It was hair-raising. We still laugh about it to this day. Another one was about this guy I knew a while ago. He wasn't such a bad guy, but he had an abrasive side and he liked to rib me for a lot of little things. At first I didn't mind so much, but after a few months of it I got pretty tired of him. My friend brought him up in conversation one night in front of a bunch of people, and as a show of disapproval of him, I said, if he died tomorrow, I wouldn't care. Well, guess what happened the next morning? He died in a motorcycle crash after some butthole doped up on pills and driving on the wrong side of the road nailed him on a blind turn. I still feel crappy about the timing. Sat outside college with some friends when several police cars appeared very suddenly, surrounding a car in the middle of the road and forcing them to stop. One of my friends said sarcastically, "Watch, they'll get the automatic weapons out next." Now, this is the north of England. It's not all that often you see the police wield any sort of firearm around here. But sure enough, 6 or 7 officers arose from their vehicles with MP5s and pointed them straight at the back of the car they'd stopped. They dragged a man out of the car and put him in the back of one of the police cars. One of the officers got into the car they'd stopped and they all drove away. The whole thing lasted about 30 or 40 seconds, and we were all sat about 10 feet away. On September 11th, I said to a coworker, "Wouldn't it be crazy if another plane hit the tower?" I was at the game in 1998 that Kerry Wood struck out 20 batters. After he struck out the first hitter in the first inning, my friend looked at me and said, "Well, only 19 more to go." By the 9th inning, we had our entire section going insane as we counted down the last 2 strikeouts to 20. People with plastic surgery, do you regret it or are you happy with your decision? I had a few scary spots on my back when I was about 13. When I got them removed, my mum told the doctors to go ahead and get rid of the birthmark that was located on my left butt cheek. I guess she thought it was big, but I kinda liked it. It was shaped like a perfect leaf, which I thought was pretty cool. Anyways, they took it and it left a scar that kinda looks like someone took a small bite out of my butt. There was just this big dent for a long time. It's still a dent, but not as big. Hopefully it goes away eventually. I'm not happy with it. I have a dent in my butt and I miss my leaf birthmark. I had jaw surgery about a year and a half ago, radically changing my bite and essentially giving me a chin. I don't regret. I can't imagine my life if I hadn't had it done. I'd been wanting the surgery since I was 11. I got the surgery when I was 18 and a half, right after graduating high school. It aligned my teeth correctly. I'd had a decade of orthodontic work prior to that, braces, a spreader, spacer, headgear, chains, and retainer. Recovery went well. While in there, the doctor brought my chin forward and adjusted my nose. While my nose looks better, I've never had a nosebleed since, after a lifetime of them. I did the same thing. My mandible jutted out significantly further than my maxilla, and the midlines of the upper and lower jaws were not in line. While I can mostly justify the surgery as being functional, after all it has significantly reduced jaw pain and clicking, it has brought symmetry to my face that I couldn't be happier about. I've had a tummy tuck, double brachioplasty, breast reduction, and a neck lift after losing 160 pounds. And as painful as they were, I'm much, much happier and more self-confident. I messed up my body when I was young and wanted to not spend the rest of my youth in a sack of extra skin. I'm very, very self-conscious about doing this, but hopefully people can understand what a change it's made in my self-esteem. I'm still not perfect, but I'm proud of how far I've come. Please don't make fun of me. You just gave me the nudge to jump on board my sister having a similar procedure. She dropped over 100 pounds in less than a year, got divorced, and really wants some family support to have a chest lift, tummy tuck, and maybe more. I thought she was being a little vain until we went shopping together, and I realized she was holding it all together with special undies. She really has a lot of skin, stretch marks, and scars, especially in her abdominal region. She wants to get back to the dating pool, but is afraid for someone to see her undressed. Yeah, I suppose this kind of surgery isn't so much I want to look hot as I want to help myself overcome something. If someone has undergone something like this kind of weight loss and has the finances, it can be a great gift for yourself. I'm actually having plastic surgery in a few months. When I was a freshman in high school, I broke my nose playing basketball and actually dislocated my septum. It healed badly and now I have a lot of breathing problems, and it's also pretty crooked. Think one standard deviation away from Owen Wilson. When they go in to fix the septum, they're going to do a bit of cosmetic work and straighten and smooth it out. Obviously, I can't tell if I'm going to regret it yet, as I haven't had it, but I can say that when I tell people I'm having it done, they all tell me it's not necessary and that I look fine the way I am. Which is nice, but a bit annoying. Hopefully the surgery will go well and I'll look like I did 8 years ago before my nose got smashed in. Oh, you're like me. The surgery itself is not the most fun thing ever. Just make sure you have at least a week to recover and lots of pain pills. The actual surgery to correct the deviated septum is pretty life-changing. I really enjoy being able to breathe through my nose, and it's something I can't take for granted anymore. I think I'm pretty happy getting the cosmetic work done. I never think about it now, several years later. My nose was so messed up that I didn't think of it as my real nose anymore, if that makes sense. So overall, it's not fun at the time, but worth it in the long run. Let me know if you have any questions, and good luck. I just recently had a rhinoplasty. I used to feel so self-conscious about people seeing me from profile view, and I still catch myself feeling anxious, and I remember I don't look like that anymore, and it makes me want to cry happy tears. I think I might want a rhinoplasty, but my nose is the family nose and we've all somehow bonded over this ridiculous schnoz. I think my family would take it as a personal slight if I had it reduced, and they would definitely make fun of me literally forever. I had a tummy tuck and my abs reconstructed after losing over 100 pounds. I have no regrets at all and it still makes me smile every day. It's been almost 10 years and I'm still so happy I did it. Had a male chest reduction surgery when I was 15. Apparently one of the most common cosmetic surgeries, but still has a stigma of embarrassment around it, which is a shame because it completely changed me for the better. My confidence boosted tenfold and I have zero regrets. Would do it again in a heartbeat. Now a normal, non-breasted 26-year-old with a great trivia fact about myself. The only shameful thing is that it isn't covered by insurance. In short, not having moobs is great. Do you have an explanation as to why you had moobs as a 15-year-old male? I'm genuinely curious. I do. It's called gynecomastia, and it manifests to some extent in a large percent of males as they go through puberty, though it typically goes away within a year or so. I was one of the lucky few. I had actual chest tissue, or chest bud, I believe they call it, which led to puffy, enlarged nipples, in addition to more common fatty tissue that made the whole moob part bigger. They temporarily detached my nipples to surgically remove the breast tissue, and then I had lipo via my armpit to remove the remaining fat. It was such a successful surgery and recovery that now it seems weird that it actually happened. A good female friend had eyelid surgery. Before, she always looked tired and had large bags under her eyes. She found a surgeon that recommended the most minimal removal of excess skin from her eyelids and area under eyes. I was pleasantly surprised that the surgeon didn't go overboard. As he stated, "We don't want to change your looks, just make you look refreshed." The surgeon did a great job and my friend couldn't be happier. I had a form of gastric bypass surgery called duodenal switch. It's like a plastic surgery just designed for weight loss. Best decision I ever made. Congratulations on your weight loss. Any complications? Yeah, my number 2s now smell so bad that I can clear an entire floor of a Chicago high-rise. Not joking. I lost more than 80 pounds and 2 years later I had a mummy makeover. Chest lift, no implants, and tummy tuck. I look better now than I did before 3 kids and gaining 80 pounds. 2 years since my surgery and I'm still super stoked. I had PRK eye surgery about 6 years ago. It was considered cosmetic as I didn't have astigmatism or corneal erosions or anything. It was incredibly painful, and since my eyes are a lot more sensitive, things like cutting onion and chili are very difficult now, and I get very itchy eyes during hay fever season. But I went from a prescription of I think about -6 to 0. I couldn't see further than about 4 inches in front of my face without glasses. I wore contact lenses, but hated that I could never be spontaneous. Things other people take for granted, like staying at a friend's house overnight, jumping into a pool without thinking about it, learning to surf or rolling over and looking at my partner first thing in the morning, I can now do those things. I don't have to switch between sunglasses and prescription glasses. I don't have to pay for new frames and lenses every few months or whatever. I feel free in a way that I wasn't before, but it wasn't a pain-free process, and it comes with its own set of negatives. Still, I'm so glad that I did it. -6 is one heck of a short distance. One day the narrator feels like they'll get LASIK or a similar procedure if they can afford it. Good to know about the potential issues. I've had 16 plastic surgeries, the majority of which would be classed as cosmetic. I was born with a congenital melanocytic nevus on half my face and into my scalp region. 6 or so surgeries were done to do skin grafts replacing the nevus with skin from my back and removing satellite nevuses, smaller nevi scattered like large moles. Later surgeries were to implant expanders and grow skin to replace the grafts and fix my hairline and brow region, as well as scar revisions and fat injections into my right brow, where I now have no eyebrows or muscles. No regrets, it was a painstaking process, but I've reached the point where I'm happy with how I look. I don't fear what others think, and although I'll always look different, the surgeries have helped me gain control of my own identity and how I see myself as a person. Oh, I actually wrote a paper back in college about this. I interviewed 16 Asian women on their thoughts on plastic surgery as well as their relationship with their parents, if that impacted their decisions to get or not get plastic surgery. Out of the 16, 3 had plastic surgery already. We'll call them A, B, and C. A had done it for their eyes and nose, vehemently denies it even though it's relatively common knowledge since she went to finishing school for a year, and came back looking radically different. She didn't have a crease above her eyes or a nose bridge before the finishing school and had them after. Out of respect for her feelings, I didn't pursue the topic. B had had her eyes done, regretted it since she became a feminist and political activist in college, felt very embarrassed about the fact that she talks about Asian pride while she had the eyelid surgery to remove a distinctly Asian feature. Deeply regrets it since her mum was the one who forced her into it. She went to the doctor thinking she was going to a dermatologist, and the doctor started talking about surgery, and she ran out, freaked out. Her mum dragged her back in, yelled at her, and told her she's ugly and needed to fix her eyes. She succumbed to the pressure and did it. Her mum took her to Vietnam, so I guess patient consent may be sketchy in some clinics. She still hates her mum for it. She had a traumatic surgery too, where the stitches popped afterwards. C also had her eyelids done. Her mum was the one who told her to do it too, and according to her, it's the best thing she ever did to me. Craziest interview I had, and most awesome quote. Sometimes you need someone to tell you you're ugly, and that's where your mum comes in. Like I'll be gaining so much weight, but I'm in denial and no one points it out. My mum would just go, "Oh my god, you look like a balloon." And I'll be like, "Oh my god, you're right." And then I go diet and fix the problem. Subject C wanted to do her nose next, but her boyfriend, and now husband, threatened to break up if she did any more plastic surgery. I got into the paper because I grew up with parents telling me I needed surgery to fix my eyes. I have the Asian monolid. I know it's relatively common for traditional Asian parents from Asia to do that, so I wanted to know just how common it was. The Asian American women I interviewed were all against plastic surgery, but my sample size is still too small, read 8. The Asian women from Asia that I interviewed, also 8, were international students from Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Japan. 1 had dual nationality and 5 grew up in 2 different Asian countries. One of the Asian women from Asia gave me the best quote. "I don't think the eyelid surgery counts as surgery, it's something every girl has to go through, like dyeing your hair." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have hair transplants. They're perfect. Nobody has ever been able to tell, even when I'm getting haircuts. I paid more than double what some guys pay, but it was worth it. Supposedly, my doctor also did Don Johnson's. Yeah, I'm glad I got them. I asked a long-term girlfriend before, if I was bald, would you have dated me? And she said no. That's not to say some guys don't look great bald, but I didn't. By the way, there are 2 big negatives. 1, I have a scar that goes ear to ear, so I can never shave my head again, unless I want to start telling people I was bit by a shark. I also have to tell my barber to use a number 4 setting with the clippers. Anything shorter and the scar becomes noticeable. 2, if you do the surgery 3 times, you'll have a full head of hair in the front, but in the back you'll have to grow long hair from the top of your head to the bottom to make a fake hairline. This looks awful from the back. I can spot it on other guys. I only had mine done once, so I don't have this problem, but now I have a seriously receding hairline on the corners of the front. I need to have that filled in, but whatever, I'll probably wait for a different kind of therapy. I've had a perineoplasty to correct some scar tissue from having kids that made doing the deed very painful, and the recovery wasn't something I would wish on my worst enemy. It was awful, but no more pain while doing the deed, so it was worth it. I also ended up having an abdominoplasty and chest job. I have a petite frame, and my 3 kids were huge. They destroyed my stomach muscles, and I ended up looking about 4 months preggo for years. I tried working with a trainer to help my stomach, but nothing was helping, and I was in physical therapy for back pain. They ended up sewing my stomach muscles back together and went ahead and tightened the skin. We figured while we were in there, I'd go ahead and get the chest done. Before kids, I was a full B, and now I'm a full C. I'm beyond happy about my stomach, even with the scar. I don't have any more back pain, and I feel so much better now just wearing clothes. The melons I could take or leave, they look great in clothes, but I'm still getting used to them. It's been 9 months. My husband loves them, so I'm happy about that. My grandma had a chest job, tummy tuck, and a butt job. She's pretty happy. Not as happy as my grandpa, though. Get it, Grandma? Is it weird to have a grandma with a fantastic rack? She went from having nothing to being decked out, so you could say it was a bit of a change. Why not, I guess? As the commenter said, you get it, Grandma. May as well have a good bedroom life in your twilight years. I was born a stick-thin girl who happens to have a huge butt. Like it was the only thing about me. And it was huge. It got me a lot of unwanted attention from men as a teenager, and people would make fun of me at school, and the negative attention, and creepy positive attention, genuinely made me want to self-delete. I was so shy and just wanted to blend into the crowd, and not be leered at by strangers. So when I was 17, I wrote a letter to my mum about how depressed I was about my body, and I was too afraid to give it to her, and hid it in my desk, where my dad found it and my mum talked to me about it. So the summer before last year of high school, I wound up getting liposuction on my butt, hips, and thighs. Not much, but enough that I don't get the catcalls and unwanted attention anymore. I feel more comfortable in my own skin. The guys I've been undressed around have never noticed my super tiny scars, even after I've told them about the procedure. The only thing that sucked was the garment I had to wear under my clothes for a few months. It was hard going to school in that, but yeah, 1,000,000% satisfied. During an anthropology class, we were on the discussion of plastic surgery with the good majority of the students bashing it for whatever various reasons they have, when one of the girls in class piped up that she had had chest augmentation done and her reasoning behind it. She said her chest was as flat as a preteen boy's and just wanted something to be there. She only upgraded to a bigger A cup and wore somewhat reserved clothes. She really changed the perspective of a lot of students because she showed that plastic surgery can be good for people and not just a bunch of 40-year-olds desperate for another way to look young. I had gynecomastia surgery when I was 26, one of the best decisions of my life. I used to walk hunched over, wear multiple layers of dark clothing, and never ever swam or changed in front of anyone. Seatbelts, bag straps, and the wind pushed my clothes up against me, showing you the moobs, were all my enemies. The surgery was 1 hour long, and it has helped my self-confidence and happiness to a great degree. Looking in the mirror is no longer a heart-plummeting affair. If any other guys are out there thinking about it, take the plunge. It's worth it. This girl I know had her nose done a year or so ago. I'm of the opinion that cosmetic surgery is understandable in some cases. It really made a difference for her because she had a huge nose and it was obviously bothering her. So she had it redone, and to be completely honest, she was already attractive before, despite the big nose, and she's even more attractive now, partly due to the fact that her confidence and general demeanor has gone through the roof since. And the nose itself looks completely normal. If you didn't know she'd had surgery on it, you'd never guess. She's not afraid to talk about it and has clearly said she's not interested in getting any more surgery. Like I said, in some cases, I think it's understandable, and in her case, it seemed like a very positive experience. I had plastic surgery done to cover a hole in the middle of my foot when I was 3. Obviously, I have no regrets. On a side note, I hate that people use the term plastic surgery when they mean cosmetic surgery. I had something more common done, which was mole removal on my face, on my chin. A small one at that. The wound got infected and it was pain at the time, but I'm 100% satisfied and forgot the thing ever existed. If it's something small like that, go and do it. I had a cyst the size of 2 large walnuts on my cheek. Plastic surgeon removed it in a 5-hour surgery. Amazingly skilled doctor managed to unwrap the cyst from all my facial nerves without damaging any. 52 stitches and some injections later, and my cheek looks like I have a natural dimple. Thank you, Asian doctor, and your excellent dexterity. Yes, very happy. Ladies love my dimple. I had a facelift, lip implants, cheek implants, chin implant, brow shave, lip shortening, chest augmentation, all done at the same time. Also, orchidectomy, but that wasn't cosmetic. I'm trans and was not passable, and the surgery basically improved my life 100-fold. I went from constantly fearful and inverted to sociable and happy. It pretty much saved my life. All this was done almost exactly a year ago. I totally regret mine, had a chest enlargement, surgeon ended up making me bigger than I wanted, which may also be exacerbated by the part where I lost 20 pounds after surgery. So they're even bigger in relation. I went from a small B to a D or double D depending on the bra. I hate the attention, I hate how clothes fit because you can't wear anything loose without looking like a cow. Plus, I now have back and neck pain. I'll have them removed or reduced as soon as I have the money. It seems surgeries that remove or adjust something that make you uncomfortable about your appearance or function are a more positive experience than purely cosmetic surgeries to boost you. Makes sense as a very general trend, I guess, and please, do your own research and don't take the word of a YouTube narrator as life advice. My best friend had a facelift in her late 30s. I think she made a terrible decision. She complained for a long time about her face sagging and would constantly do somewhat of a duck face, but like cheek-biting face in pictures. She still does it, but not to the same degree. I think there's a lot more to it psychologically than just fixing her face. Anyways, turns out she was severely allergic to the dissolving stitches, which caused the wounds next to the earlobe to become infected. You could see the scarring, but it was nothing all that bad. I mean, not to the extent it is now. Anyways, she was really self-conscious about the scarring, so she decided she'd go in and have them redo the procedure. They redid it, and it left a huge stretch mark across her cheek and stretched her face to the point it looks as though she's not had cheek definition. I can't really explain it, but it sure looks odd. The worst part of it though, because there was not enough skin to reattach the side of her ear and earlobe, they stretched the earlobe so much that on one side of her face it's essentially attached to her earlobe that's attached to her jaw. The other side is bad, but nothing like the other. It's called pixie ears. She's super self-conscious about it and wears her hair in front of it all the time, and it looks terrible. All in all, she looks thinner because of her face, but you can really notice the facelift, and the ear thing makes you pay attention to it so much more. It's odd and makes me uncomfortable, especially because I notice other people looking at it and how uncomfortable she gets. Let's just say I think it was a terrible decision on her part. I had chest implants put in almost 2 years ago. It was one of the best decisions I've made. I had my children young, at 20 and 24. After nursing them, my chest was actually smaller than before I had children, and were essentially pockets of skin. As silly as it may sound, it really wrecked my confidence. I didn't really feel comfortable in form-fitting shirts or swimsuits. I found a really great doctor that I felt comfortable with and had my negative 34A cup enhanced to a full 34C. I didn't realize how uncomfortable I was with my body until after I had surgery. For me, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. If there was one piece of advice I could give to those considering surgery, it would be to interview multiple doctors. Find someone that's talented and on the same page with you as to what you're looking for. In short, I love my fake chest. I have webbed feet and an old girlfriend wanted me to get them cut. I kicked her to the curb. Nobody messes with my groovy mutation. I got a double lid eye surgery. I don't regret it. I think it's actually a major change as the recovery was quite fast. I guess it hasn't really changed me, but I do like my eyes a bit more, though I guess we'll see in a few years. Wait staff. What's the most convoluted order you've ever taken? I always feel bad for the waitress when out to dinner with my mother-in-law. I swear just ordering a glass of water with ice ends up being difficult. Oh, your omelets have 3 eggs? Can you make mine with 1.5? No yolk, just replace the 1.5 yolks with some extra egg white. I swear to frickin' God, I had a woman ask for egg whites, then insist on getting a discount because she wasn't eating the whole egg. If anything, she should be charged extra for wasting egg parts. Not necessarily a convoluted order, but I think it still fits here. I work at a from-scratch Italian restaurant. Had a guy come in with his wife and sit at the bar on a busy Saturday night. He informed me he was following the TB12 diet from Tom Brady's new diet and exercise book, and had very strict dietary restrictions because of this. He sent me back and forth to the kitchen no less than 7 times to verify the chef that his dinner order would have no iodized salt, sugar, olive oil, gluten, peppers, or tomatoes. He ended up with a plain piece of fish and some vegetables. We were getting slammed, but I still tried to keep my patience and accommodate the guy the best I could, even though doing so was putting me in the weeds. After dinner, I asked if they'd like anything else, and don't you know, this guy orders himself a bread pudding, very much filled with forbidden gluten and sugar, and eats the whole thing. He just goes, "Well, I mean, you have to allow yourself a treat every now and again." I died a little more inside. Yeah, he was off that diet by the end of the week, guaranteed. Kinda sounds like he was never on it to begin with. Some confusion arose once because a customer wanted a plain cheeseburger. Brought a cheeseburger with no toppings or condiments. She was very upset. Turns out she wanted a hamburger. My husband has this problem a lot, but opposite. He asks for a plain cheeseburger and they always bring him a hamburger. We've started saying a plain cheeseburger with cheese. I previously worked at a wing shop. Guy calls and asks for 24 mild traditional wings. He then proceeds to ask for them to be fried twice. No big deal, that's pretty common. He also wants them covered in Mexican shredded cheese, put in the microwave for 30 seconds, drizzled with mayonnaise, and wants his side of fries placed on the wings rather than in a separate container, and demanded the wings be in a pool of mild sauce, which was just short of overflowing the container. Finally, he requested to have pickle juice squeezed lightly across the top of everything. Obviously, all the waiters, cooks, and waitresses thought this was disgusting, but we'd never smelled something so amazing come from the kitchen in our lives. Did not taste as pleasant as it smelled. So I regularly talk about the posts that make me gag, but to be honest, they're generally reserved for medical story compilations. Congratulations, random wings orderer, you made it to the list. Yeah, can I have a Reuben sandwich but with turkey instead of corned beef, no cheese, and no 1000 islands? Can you do mayo instead? Oh, and can I get that on sourdough? Oh, and add stone ground mustard too, please. Of course. Would you still like sauerkraut on your not a Reuben? Coffee frappuccino. Half and half instead of milk, coffee filled up to 2/5 of the cup before blending, Light ice, 2 shots espresso, shake ingredients and then blend it 3 times. Use half the bottle of caramel drizzle on the sides of the cup before pouring the drink in. Extra whipped cream, and then add more caramel drizzle to the top. This woman came in every day, watched you make her drink, and would force you to remake it over and over until she was satisfied. She once returned the drink for not having enough caramel drizzle. As I was remaking it, the cap blew off the drizzle bottle, and nearly the entire contents oozed into the cup. It being a Frappuccino happy hour, I said, "Screw it," and gave it to her like that. She said it was the best she's ever tasted. The entire store absolutely loathed Frappuccinos. I'll just throw mine on yours since it's another Starbucks customer. Venti, heavy whipping cream, 7 pumps of white mocha, 6 pumps caramel flavor, 5 shots, 4 Splenda, 3 sweet and low, extra caramel sauce drizzle, like a quarter of a bottle. She came in every single morning for this abomination, but she tipped really well, so hey, whatever. I serve food at a country club, so I deal entirely with people that have more wealth than I'll probably ever have. A lot of these people are really nice and are actually friendly. However, many are also very snobby, high maintenance, and just rude. One night I had a table. It was 2 couples on a double date, and both couples were less than friendly. One woman ordered a salmon. I can't remember the rest because this one woman was the bane of my existence. I serve them entrees and let them eat for a while before I do the typical, "How's everyone doing?" 9 times out of 10, everyone just says everything's fine and just want me to leave so they can eat. Not this lady. She calls me over and tells me she didn't think I gave her salmon. Looking at her plate, I can see the fish is pink and very clearly salmon. I've served the salmon hundreds of times. She insists I go to the kitchen and ask what fish it was. Of course it's salmon, which I return and tell her politely it's indeed salmon. She gets angry and tells me how it doesn't taste like any salmon she ever had and that she's had salmon many times and that what I served her wasn't salmon. After getting more and more angry about not having salmon, she looks me dead in the eyes and says, "This tastes like turtle." I honestly didn't know how to react, so I just asked if she was sure and she says, "Yes, I actually like it, but it isn't salmon." I'm still blown away by this woman. She got so angry with me about this mix-up. We don't serve turtle. I don't know anywhere that does, and she liked it? I don't understand these people's lives. I had someone order a side of jalapenos to be put on their burger. I bring them out, she looked at them and tells me they're green onions. They were just fresh jalapenos, and the only kind she had apparently ever seen were the pickled ones. I told her they were jalapenos, and she fought me tooth and nail over it. Made me get the manager and still didn't believe them. People amaze me. I'm no waiter, but I do work the food line at my restaurant. The weirdest thing I've seen was a lettuce-wrapped taco with only lettuce in it. A lettuce wrap is a taco shell that's made of lettuce, by the way. I used to work at a burrito joint. Someone ordered a burrito with bean juice but no beans. This one guy ordered spaghetti and meatballs at a restaurant I was a cook for, except he wanted French fries instead of spaghetti noodles. I had a friend who would always order a glass of water with no ice, with some extra lemon slices. Then he'd start making free lemonade at the table. Sometimes there weren't sugar packets at the table already, and I'd die inside when he asked the waiter for sugar packets. By the time we got our food, his warm lemonade was ready, at which point he'd ask for a glass of ice. A half rack of ribs, no sauce, well done, microwaved after taking it off the grill for 5 minutes. 8 sides of Thousand Island dressing to dip it in, broccoli, no butter, triple steamed, a sweet potato with 4 sides of sour cream, a water with no ice, and then 2 cups of ice. Then 15 minutes later decided he wanted another half rack of ribs the same way. This was a year ago, but I will never forget because he snapped at me a ton of times while I was talking to other customers. Then he had the nerve to complain to my manager because his rolls came late, but they'd just been popped into the oven and were baking when he ordered them. Screw that guy. Why is this the second order that specifically requests the freshly cooked food be microwaved? That's a crime against the culinary personnel in my mind. So gross. I once had a woman order her eggs fried hard, scrambled hard. And when I asked her if she wanted her eggs fried or scrambled, as they're 2 completely different ways of making eggs, she had no idea what I was talking about and kept repeating, "Fried hard, scrambled hard." It took some pressing from both myself and her group to figure out what she wanted. I believe it was scrambled hard. She's kept saying that she's just always ordered fried hard, scrambled hard, and didn't understand our confusion. "I bought my own tea bag. Can I have some hot water, please?" 5 minutes later, "Can I have a lemon wedge, please?" 2 minutes later, "Can I have some honey?" I hated the ones that wanted to make their own lemonade to try and avoid having to pay for it. "We'll have water. Could you bring out a cup of sliced lemons and a bunch of Splenda as well?" Not necessarily convoluted, but worked in an Indian restaurant in the UK with a kitchen staff of all Indian people, and lots of people would come in and pretty much detail exactly how they wanted their curry cooked. Like, "This is not a jalfrezi," upon being presented with their dish and then explaining to the manager how it should be cooked. I feel like I should point out these were obviously non-Indian people. I had a guy order a chicken korma but make it spicy. After much discussion, the chef agreed to put some chili into it, knowing well that the dish would be weird. A Caesar salad with no croutons, no chicken, no dressing, no bacon, and no cheese. So it was just lettuce. What the frick? Seems like it would be easier at that point to say, "I'd just like a bowl of romaine lettuce with lemon squeezed over it." A guy in front of me in the line ordered iced coffee heated up in a microwave. The barista replies, "You mean hot coffee?" To which he replies, I don't know. When I'm home, I make my coffee the night before and put it in the fridge and then microwave it the next morning." That's almost endearing. I hope the barista said something like, "Well then, prepare to have your mind blown and your coffee experience taken to the next level," and then proceeded to pour him some fresh, hot coffee. Philly cheesesteak sandwich. No cheese, no peppers, no condiments, no bread, no side of fries. She wanted to pay $16 for shredded beef with onions. My daughter was just old enough to go through a buffet alone. She wanted a slice of roast beef and heard people ahead of her ask for medium. She thought, "I'm smaller than them, so I don't need a big piece." The guy slicing off portions asked her how she wanted her beef, so she said, "small." He just silently gave her a small piece of medium-done roast beef. Eating at an Indian restaurant, I overheard a woman ordering nearby who wanted a curry but steamed veggies, no oil, and no salt. No rice, curry on the side. I have no idea what the kitchen actually made for her. I feel like she doesn't often go to restaurants. Not so much convoluted as stupid. Our wings were breaded and he didn't seem to read that part on the menu. He sent them back because of the extra carbs and ordered a hamburger, no bun, with a side of fries. I didn't really mind this order, but it was very odd and multiple managers came to ask me about it after I put it in and laughed when I showed them. I do all of the Grubhub orders at the restaurant and someone simply ordered 4 lemonades. That's it, for $2.50 each plus the delivery fee. And the go-to drinks aren't very big, and it's just run-of-the-mill lemonade. I really wish I got to deliver the drinks to the person to see what was up with that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A kid asked me for a cheeseburger, but cheese on only half the burger. So half hamburger, half cheeseburger. The parents were a little embarrassed and said I didn't have to humor him, but I liked the cut of his jib. This kid knew what he wanted. I walked the order back to the cook, explained the situation, and the whole kitchen got on board. I used to work at a Steak and Shake, and my favorite customer ever was the kid who ordered a Krabby Patty, and his parents who were silently pleading with me just to go with it. I did, and the kid lit up when he got his order, and it was adorable. When I was a kid, my mum would often do crazy things like go through the drive-thru at McDonald's and ask the people inside to open a can of tuna for her. She was on a weird self-imposed diet. Then when they opened the can of tuna, she would complain that they didn't drain the water correctly. I was just a kid, but would basically die from embarrassment in the back seat. I once had an old man send back a plate of hash browns twice because he wanted them burnt to a crisp, like completely blackened. "But of course, sir. Might I also suggest sir just lies on the ground so he can shovel the ashes directly from the fireplace into his gullet? Bon appetit." Not convoluted, but I once had a guy order a pizza with no crust. Okay, like crust cut off? No, like no bread at all. What? We ended up taking a takeout container, putting in sauce, cheese, and pepperoni, heating it up, and they ate it with a spoon. It still haunts me. People that go into length about how they can have absolutely no gluten, then moan and complain when there are no croutons on their salad. Worked in a restaurant that took the gluten allergy really seriously. Lady says she's allergic to gluten and even a crumb will give her issues. Okay, this is a pizza place. So they cleaned the entire area, made the pizza, and brought it out to her. She loves it. Good. Came back 5 minutes later and she's trying a slice of her husband's pizza, which was not gluten-free. I told her that what she's eating isn't gluten-free, out of caution, and she said, "Well, it's not really an allergy, I just don't want it in my food." Stupid, entitled bint. I came into a shift where the previous server already had a full section. No problem, you just explain to the guest that you're taking over and to let you know if they need anything. Everything is great, I have one mum and daughter table. The previous server had already taken the order and put it in, so I was basically there to finish them up. Their meals are good and they're enjoying everything. Time to give her the check and she goes, "For future reference, if someone tells you they're low-carbing, you don't give them dates and craisins in their salad." What the frick? The menu is literally right there and it says the salad comes with those things. Granted, I didn't take the order and still apologized to her, but Christ, if you're following a diet, it's your responsibility to be mindful for what you put into your body. We called it the Corey Special because this guy would come in every week and get the exact same thing. Large yum bowl and greens, vegan sub avocado, add cabbage and carrots, half sauce sub nori, add tempeh, no chips, sub crispy noodles on a plate, half rice sub greens. He was a super nice guy though, so no one really minded that he had the order from hell. I used to work as a waiter over the summer. Second day on the job, a group of 20 arrived who had all pre-ordered their meals a month ago for the booking, and no one could remember what they ordered. By some kind of cosmic punishment, I was the only waiter they sent to the group. This happened to me one time also. I had a sheet of paper with people's names and what they ordered for each course, but nobody was wearing name tags and people were too busy talking to listen to their names being called. Luckily, this one lady in the group asks if she can help, so I give her the paper and she starts directing me where to go based on the plates I was holding. She said that she was a waitress before when she was in college and also saw how frustrating the situation was. I brought her a drink before she left. The order itself wasn't particularly difficult, but this lady wanted weak tea, like hot water that has a tea bag put in for a very short amount of time. Simple enough, we're on the same page, right? Problem was, she didn't want me to bring her the hot water and the tea bag, she wanted me to make it for her and to do so perfectly. It took like 6 or 7 tries before she was like, "Now that is some good weak tea." The guy she was eating with was covering his face in shame for being seen with this woman. I wanted to get as far away from her as possible. Since her drink order was so annoying, I was afraid of what her food order would be. Thankfully, she didn't ask for anything special in that department, but I was half expecting to have to heat her food to a very specific temperature or something along those lines. I had a woman once come up and scream at me in front of a full house because I recommended our club sandwich to her husband and he could not finish the sandwich. She stated that I emasculated him and that they'd been coming to our business for a long time and that she couldn't believe he was being treated that way. I know that she was trying to get me to comp the sandwich, but I refused and told her that's why we offered to box food up. They never came back. I rarely, if ever, have been rude to a customer, and deep down it bothered me that I was the reason they didn't come back, but at some point you have to take a stand from being taken advantage of. A man with a hangover swore blind that the best cure for said hangover was raw steak. So he ordered raw steak and I served him raw steak and then watched as he ate that raw steak like a famished velociraptor rex. Cook a large flank steak fried in salted butter. Eat that, put on a pair of wet socks, and go to sleep. I cannot for the life of me imagine why consuming raw beef would reduce the likelihood of throwing up. Quite the opposite, actually. But you do you, my self-poisoning boozy wastrel. Worked at a steakhouse very similar to Texas Roadhouse. I had someone order a salad without lettuce. They just wanted a plate with all the different toppings around the edges. Dressing, carrots, cheese, etc. Not as crazy as others, but it still blew my mind. One customer, 2 orders. The first would be paid by card, a cheese and ham toastie with a cup of tea. The ham had to be taken out of the toastie and put in a separate bag, and the toastie had to be cut into quarters and delivered to their table. We don't do that normally. The second part was paid by cash and was a tandoori chicken baguette, cut in half, delivered in 2 separate bags, and a long black with milk and water on the side. Again, we don't do that. Greg's is a tiresome job and customers like that only make it worse. I was a cook for years, but my favorite was this. A waitress ordered a burger and said the customer wanted it between rare and medium. So I said, so they want it medium rare? She went, no, they want it between rare and medium, which initiated a 2-minute discussion between her, another cook, and myself about the fact medium rare is between rare and medium. A medium rare steak with no blood was sent back twice before we gave him a well-done steak. He said it was the best steak he'd ever had in his life. He also didn't tip. I take orders from people who want seafood steamed at my store. I work the seafood counter at a grocery store. Weekends bring the drunks out. They always take about half an hour to figure out what they want and it always ends up being pricey. Last weekend, an intoxicated woman riding one of those scooters meant for the disabled took the cake. She had 2 toddler-sized kids in the scooter basket and a friend walked alongside her. She had me weigh out portions of almost everything in our case. She finally settled on U2 crab legs. She wanted them seasoned and steamed. She couldn't decide what seasoning, so she just told me to mix them all and throw it in there. We have Creole, Old Bay, lemon pepper, and slap your mama. Her ticket came to $99 as those giant crab legs are about $36 a pound. She waited around while I prepared her order. When it was done and packaged, she stood up from her scooter and wobbled toward me to take her package. She said, "Woo, they smell funky. I don't want it no more." And she rode off into the night, leaving behind the vapor of cheap whiskey. I worked at TGI Fridays and waited on some insane woman. She told me she wanted the Parmesan shrimp steak. This was a popular advertised item at Applebee's at the time. I told her that we don't have that, but if she really wants it, there's an Applebee's down the street. She asked if we had anything like that. I told her we have steak and we have grilled shrimp skewers. I told her we didn't have any type of cream sauce and the food wouldn't be exactly like Applebee's. She says fine and orders that. I think everything is fine until the food is brought to her and I kid you not, her face goes white and she looks at me like I just murdered her firstborn. She starts yelling how it's not the Parmesan shrimp steak and that the shrimp were on the side of the plate and not on the steak included. She probably ended up getting the food comped or some crap, since that's how those corporate chain places operate. She ate the whole thing anyway. You could have walked to Applebee's from her table, so either she was insane or just wanted free food. I saw more people get crazy upset about their $10 plate of garbage chain food than you would ever imagine. In short, woman orders an Applebee's menu item at a TGI Fridays. When it wasn't exactly the same, she lost her damn mind. 12 German guys spread out between 3 tables. Perfectly pleasant, though language is a bit of a barrier. They all ordered gammon and chips, cod and chips, burger and chips, etc. A low-alcohol lager each. It was a roadside restaurant. So far, so good. Then for the next hour or so, they would call me over and order another lager there, another there, and a third for this chap. I think it had something like 0.4% alcohol, and they were trying to make up for it to the level of a normal pint. Then, having eaten their meals, they wanted the same again. Only this time, one guy wanted the cod and the other wanted the chips on a separate plate. Ditto the gammon, then desserts. About half of them had a second dessert. Then they wanted to pay separately, not split the bill 12 ways. They wanted to pay for exactly what each of them had. I left the manager with them at the till. Luckily, she spoke German. What's the worst way you've seen a person self-destruct in court? I took my ex to court because she had used my social security number to sign up for cable. I found out about it when she stopped paying for the service. She screwed herself over by just being herself. We showed up to court, I turned in the contract from the cable company, showing my social security number and her own name signed on the contract. She didn't even try to forge my signature. She signed her own name in and tried to deny that she had had any part in it. The judge tore her apart, and it was nice. Represented a guy that stole 3 trucks from his work. Only 2 were recovered before trial. He showed up to a motion hearing in the 3rd one. I'm doing landlord-tenant cases, and my client was facing eviction over non-payment, but the client was withholding rent payments because of habitability issues in the department. No heat, high lead levels, vermin. This is going to be an easy win for me. I told my client continually to make sure they don't spend the money. Keep it, but don't spend it. Because if you showed the judge you still have the money, it looks really good for you in terms of making the judge believe that you're withholding for good reasons. We get up in front of the judge, the landlord doesn't have an attorney, so I'm dancing inside. There's no way I can lose. I make my arguments and the landlord makes his. Judge asks my client if they still have the money. The client goes, "Nah, I blew that crap at the casino last week." My wife is the lawyer. When children reach the age of majority, if they don't continue studying and start working, it's not necessary to pay alimony. My wife's client found a new lover, which unleashed the wrath of the ex-wife, who started asking for more alimony for her children. Well, to win the case, it was necessary to prove that the children were working, but they could not get any proof of it. There was not much chance of winning, but they still went to court hoping that with the interrogations, they could find information that would put them in evidence. On the day of the trial, the children did not go, only the mother and her lawyer were present. The judge said, "Madam, tell me why your children couldn't come." The mum said, "They couldn't get permission from work." The judge and mother stared at each other for about a minute in awkward silence. Then the judge said, "Well, that was fast." I should note that the topic of this story grouping was what was the worst way you saw a person screw over someone else in court, but so far every single story I've read has been clients self-screwing. but don't be surprised if the original context rears its head at some point. I had a client who was trying to get away from a psycho ex and filed for a restraining order. He shows up to the final hearing and is making a big fuss about a truck they brought during their marriage. He said it was just his and she had no rights to it because their marriage was void. I asked him on cross-examination what he meant by that, and he said that he had already been married in another state when he married my client. He said that my client had no idea, but that it means that their marriage is invalid and the truck was all his. Not only is that legally inaccurate, the transcript of the hearing was promptly turned over to the police, who were actively investigating him for bigamy. Oh, and the judge gave my client the truck along with a 2-year no-contact order. A friend kept meticulous records of how much time his estranged wife spent with their daughter. He used pink highlighter for Mum and blue highlighter for himself. Mum sailed into arbitration demanding full custody and handsome child support and the house. Dad pulled out 3 years' worth of year-long calendars. Mum had spent less than a full month with the child in 3 years. I can tell you she wasn't happy with the outcome. This might be a dumb question, but how are the calendars verified to be true? You'd be surprised. Not divorce-related, but a previous co-worker, we're civil engineers, had a case where the only thing that made it not a he-said-she-said situation was that he kept a phone log with short summaries of what was decided. It was basically, he's got a log that he's willing to swear by was written the day of the call that says you approved this change. Do you have anything to the opposite? I'm a lawyer. I saw someone screw themselves. I work as a public servant in a criminal law judge's office, and since I have a law degree, I don't normally do administrative work, though I get to be with the judge in some of the hearings. Last month we had a huge substance trafficking case. I'm talking about 20 or more people involved, months of investigation, undercover agents, videos, audio, the whole ordeal. The hearing lasted 3 days. Anyway, when it was time for one of the defendants to be on the stand so the prosecutor could read the charges he was accusing him of, he was pleading not guilty, as he very loudly stated from the majority of the hearing up until my boss, the judge, told him to shut up or he would be admonished. To which he replied, "What are you going to do, arrest me?" Which, to be honest, was actually a bit funny. The prosecutor, as part of the facts of his case, told him that he was being accused of selling, trafficking, and carrying X amount of X substances, with the base of his operation being his house, where he lived with his partner. Mind you, said partner wasn't even in the hearing. She wasn't arrested or anything, as there was nothing tying her to the case. And the defendant said, "Wait up. I was the one selling the substances. She didn't do anything." His lawyer, a state-assigned public lawyer, facepalmed so hard it's actually recorded in the audio of the hearing. A witness for the plaintiff in a civil suit, who was a co-worker of the plaintiff, testified very strongly against the company and in favor of the plaintiff. I questioned her about bias towards the plaintiff, if they knew each other well and were friends, etc. She said no, just friendly co-workers, work friends at best. I pinned her to it. When I got a chance to cross-examine the plaintiff, she had no choice but to burn her witness's credibility, because not only were they very close friends, but they'd become sisters-in-law just a few years before. No, they didn't have the same last name or anything, but I'd done my homework. I still don't get why people want to fight small bias by destroying their credibility, but it happens more than you'd think. I'm being sparse on the details here due to confidentiality, but I had a client who was accused of very nasty offenses at work. He had an alibi. He was at work where he was the boss. He had an employee who could absolutely vouch for his being there. I talked to the employee, and the employee confirmed this. It gets closer to the trial, around the time when I need to send an alibi notice, which is advance notice to the Crown so that they can investigate the alibi and determine whether or not it's true. But I'm being careful, so I call the employee up again. It turns out my client fired him in the interim, so the employee quite candidly tells me, the lawyer, "Oh yeah, he was definitely at work, but that's not what I'm going to say in court. Screw that guy, he's going down." I didn't call him as a witness or file the alibi notice. I still won the trial, but if I hadn't thought to call the guy or if he'd been less candid, my client would have been screwed really bad. He would have been on the offender registry, had jail time, the works, completely innocent. Wait, he was the boss and stupid enough to fire his alibi witness before the trial? My God. From talking to the employee, I'm guessing he sorely deserved the firing. That said, people accused of crimes might not be the brightest, but even the smart ones often make some dumb mistakes. I mean, a lot of people with illegal content on their laptop get caught because they take their computer in to get fixed and don't think, "Hey, I'm handing off evidence of very serious crimes to a random stranger." The narrator is certain that due to both his inability to lie and tendency to immediately say the least appropriate thing in any given social context, he would end up in one of these stories if he ever did a serious crime, and then maybe someone will narrate my court case on this channel. Too many criminal client situations to count of them screwing themselves over. One of the very few family law cases I handled as a young attorney sticks out to me though. A young woman and a young man have a child. The young woman seeks divorce from young man because he enjoys the thug life. He had recently been arrested and charged for possession with intent to distribute crystal, a felony, and in possession of a firearm, unlawful carry. The young man doesn't like her leaving him. He hires a local big-name top divorce attorney, granted, very rural area, gets a temporary divorce order entered saying she can't have overnight male guests. This is actually more common than you would think in conservative areas. I think it's mostly a thing of the past in more urban places. The young woman starts seeing someone new. The young man is very upset about this. He has his fancy lawyer ask for a hearing, accusing her of violating court order and seeking full custody on top of attorney fees. The young woman, on advice from a mutual friend, hires me for this hearing. I sit down with the opposing counsel, and she's basically trying to strong-arm me with her experience and lays out egregious terms. The mother must not only give up her primary custody, but must have visitation with a supervisor and pay child support and attorney fees. She knows I'm a new baby attorney in town, fairly certain that I'd been licensed for less than a year. I balk, and she says she'll see us in court. I go into the hearing with a copy of his probation arrangement with his possible intent to sell and unlawful carry. He hasn't even told his attorney about this, and she is unaware. She calls him up and establishes how my client had her new boyfriend over on X, Y, and Z nights. The judge is very conservative and not pleased about this. Then the opposing counsel passes the witness. I ask him if he has a job. No. What do you do for money? Things here and there. Oh? Miss opposing counsel is awfully expensive. Do you sell crystal? What? Have you ever sold substances to make ends meet? No. Introduces a copy of his guilty plea and straight probation sentencing. The judge is now staring daggers at him. I lean over to my client sitting next to me and whisper, "If you took a substance test today, be honest, would you be completely clean?" She says yes. I ask the young man, "When was the last time you did crystal?" His attorney objects, but the judge overrules. I know this judge will do substance tests on people on the spot, as he's also the misdemeanor substance court judge. It's been years, I'm clean now. So if you were tested, you'd be clean? Yes. The opposing counsel asks the same of my client, and we agree. The judge has them both tested. The guy tests positive for crystal. My client is clean. The judge denies his motion and asks me to send in new temporary orders where the young man is required to maintain employment and start paying child support, and places the man on supervised visits. Icing on the cake, the opposing counsel actually calls me and leaves me a voicemail congratulating me on, and I quote, handing her butt to her for the first time in a very long time. That last part is nice. Your opponent didn't take it very personally and even showed respect. Nice. I've probably been very lucky in my career that very few opposing counsel, be they for the state or in minor civil matters, I try to avoid civil these days though, take things personally with me. I'm a very jovial guy and I try to get to know them over the course of cases. There is one prosecutor I currently have cases with where we may argue cases and issues, but between being before the bench, we share our respective latest cool D&D moments. We both DM games. Just recently, he and I had one of our last cases on the docket and we were discussing said sessions, and the judge had to interrupt us and say, "If I could get you nerds to stop for a second and do this motion, that'd be nice. I'd like to go to lunch." Huh, the laughs were had. Lawyers that take things personally or get personal with opposing counsel are crappy lawyers and don't belong in the profession. But that's just my opinion, man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This was a case another prosecutor in my office had a few years back. A 30-year-old defendant was charged with the unspeakable act after he got his girlfriend's sister pregnant. She actually kept the baby, so the police just waited and got a paternity test. No surprise, defendant was the father. Defendant wanted probation. Prosecutor refused to offer it. He decided to plead guilty and have a jury trial on punishment. Here in Texas, you can choose to have the jury set the punishment. Evidence mostly proceeded as expected. The victim testified to having consensual, aside from being old enough to consent, whoopee with the defendant, getting pregnant, among other things. Paternity test was introduced. The defendant took the stand. His version of events was that he snuck into the victim's room at night, covered her mouth, and held her down while he committed the unspeakable act. It seemed like his own lawyer had no idea that that's the story he was going to go with. The jury deliberated for about 15 minutes before returning a verdict of 17 years. The maximum possible charge was 20. When interviewed by the attorneys afterwards, one of them said they decided on 17 years so the defendant would never forget the age of consent in Texas again. So a group of friends and I rented a 5-bedroom house in college. And being the group of guys we were, we partied pretty hard and were really rough on the house. We knew going in we were not getting our deposit back. Well, partway through living there, the septic started to have some problems. Whenever someone used the downstairs shower, it would drain pretty slowly, basically filling up the basin as you used it. Also, one of the room's carpets would get wet, so we emailed the property service to fix it. 2 weeks later, they sent out a plumber to snake the line and leave. Well, that didn't fix it, so we emailed again. 2 to 3 weeks, plumber, snake, leave. Still not fixed, email, and about 2 to 3 weeks and they scoop the line. Turns out roots had grown into the line, so they had to do a big old process to completely remove all the roots. Now it's fixed. Well, we all move out and go our separate ways. One of my buddies goes to Australia for 9 months. When he gets back, he comes home to a bunch of voicemails. Turns out the property company is coming after us for like $5,000 on top of the deposit. They tried to pressure him into either paying the money or he'd be taken to court. He told them he'd see them in court. For the couple of months leading up to the court date, he'd get calls telling him to pay and it would all go away. The day before the first day of court, they call him and tell him to pay $2,000 and give them info for one of the other people living on the original lease. He says to go to heck and see you in court. The first day of court is just to make sure everyone knows and to schedule the actual case. The lawyer for the property company shows up, is scrambling to figure out what's going on. He had no records beyond the original lease, which changed a couple of times as people moved in and out. My buddy helps him out by giving him copies of the multiple emails that we sent them to fix the septic and the damage it did to the house. Told my buddy he'd let us know how they wanted to proceed, and we never heard from the company again. Gotta love a justice against crappy landlords story. Keep records of your interactions with the people who own your property and photos, folks. You never know when they'll help you. Someone I knew had a pro Dio case where she had to defend a person who had been charged with a criminal offense. I don't know what, confidential and, Even though the police and DA could pretty much pinpoint the crime to her client, there was no evidence to tie him to the crime, circumstantial at best. She had instructed him to shut up and let her do the talking during the trial. As from experience, the client sometimes doesn't know how to answer a question properly. She pleads and can show that the court has nothing on her client. She feels that for once, a pro Dio case is going her way. After her plea, the judge thanks her for her plea and turns to the client. He asks if the client's had something to add to the plea. The client looks at her, back at the judge, tears well up in his eyes, and he blurts out, "I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again." She threw her notes and everything else she had in her hands at the client, now convict apparently. She basically got screwed by her own client who screwed himself even worse. Well, not my story, but a prior boss's story. They had a drunk driver kills a car worth of people case at the time where they were a general practitioner. My boss was representing the family that got hit, of which only the father was alive, and wanted the college guy's drunk driving skin to be mounted on a wall. This was back before Facebook was commonly used in court proceedings and before tons of people realized that crap is too great for any attorney worth their weight in salt to pass up. So, the drunk driving college kid had managed to get the judge's sympathy during the first part of the hearing by saying he was sorry, haunted, and never going to drink again. This was going to ruin his life. The judge seemed to be eating it up. Then comes my boss, who immediately burns this kid's remorse story to the ground by showing numerous Facebook statuses and photos of them binge drinking, partying, and even joking about driving drunk from the date of the accident up until a night ago. The kid looked like he was being forced to swallow hot coals, and the judge was absolutely livid. Needless to say, the kid had to do way more than just apologize and be remorseful after that. My dad was the equivalent of a public defender decades ago. There was this guy that would get caught for being drunk in public lewdness, etc. every weekend. He seemed to draw the same judges and was pretty well known to everyone in the courthouse as an absolute lost cause. One of the regular judges had him appear in his court again. The judge is ready to give him a prison sentence because he was driving a car this time. But the guy starts crying that he finally got a job out of town and was trying to turn his life around. The judge tells him that as long as he never makes a mistake in my town again, he would just drop the charges. Well, sure as heck, this guy shows up the following Monday. Same judge, driving drunk again. My dad now has his case. The judge tells him he gave him his final chance, to which the guy sobs and replies, "I was leaving town, Your Honor, but my friend decided to throw me a going-away party." The judge was not amused. My dad had to do everything he could not to laugh. In short, perpetual drunk that drove, gets a chance to leave town and not face charges, but gets drunk at a going-away party in his honor, drives and goes to jail. Faced the same judge both times. I'm currently representing a sweet old lady on a case. I'll be sparse in details in case anyone figures out who I am. Long story short, this lady's neighbor convinces her that her house is basically unsellable, that her house requires all sorts of repairs, the repairs to the house would bankrupt her, and that she should just sell the house. To him. He shows up at her house the next day with documents to sign. She has no idea what's going on and doesn't read anything. She actually has an eye condition and signs everything. When she finally sees a lawyer to close the deal, he says, "What the frick, you can't do this." You see, the price of the transaction was about 36% of what the house was actually worth, and there weren't any repairs that needed to be done that would justify the price. Not kidding, it was stuff like fixing a faucet in the bathroom. Also, she didn't understand that she would have nowhere to live afterwards. The old lady thought she could just stay in the house until she died. To make matters worse, she's living off a modest pension and the other side is suing her for the house. They're essentially trying to get her to cave because her legal fees are getting exorbitant. I hate people. To answer a few questions. 1. We do have a lot in our favor, but there are a lot of steps to get to trial. By the time we get there, she's going to have to spend a lot of money. Money she doesn't have. 2. She has an eye condition. Uveitis, but it isn't bad enough to qualify as a defense, non est factum. At the time, she was driving. 3. She's a terrible witness. Her evidence is all over the place. When she was examined, deposed for you Americans, she denied being taken advantage of. That's not great for our position. 4. In Ontario, where I practice, contracts for purchase of real estate don't have to be notarized. This comes later, I just thought I'd provide a quick update. We literally just settled this afternoon, so my client can live in peace. In a little more debt than before, but nothing that will bankrupt her. As much as there are some evil lawyers in the world, I guess we do at least need a couple like this man or woman to do the good work in cases like this against evil exploitative monsters like the neighbor in this story. I was litigating a custody dispute on behalf of the mother in an incredibly conservative jurisdiction. One of the most common ways to get custody was to allege an addiction to adult content or just doing the deed, because the threshold for it was basically non-existent. For this hearing, however, we lucked out with the judge who I knew from other cases. Opposing counsel tried to gotcha me into settling before the hearing by showing me surprise messages of an adult nature between the mum and her new boyfriend. This is, of course, not law and order, and you can't introduce surprise evidence. So we go through the hearing, I object to the messages, but say I'd allow them to be read into the record in their entirety. So the uptight, very conservative local attorney gets to spend the next 25 minutes or so reading these messages in open court, occasionally asking if she could gloss over parts, but no, I didn't feel it would be appropriate to gloss over them as there's a woman's livelihood in the balance. I'll never forget hearing her struggle with certain words. They weren't even dirty. But this was like the third hearing we had to amend custody because this guy felt like his ex-wife having a boyfriend meant that she was an addict to doing the deed. They alleged the messages happened while the kid was in the mum's custody, but they based that on the timestamp of the screenshots. The timestamp on the texts was clearly at a time when the kid was not even around, and mum was safe to do the deed over the phone. The judge had heard enough of this bullcrap and awarded attorney's fees and put in the order. Consistent with the vexatious litigant statute, the dad would continue to be liable for her attorney's fees if he kept pushing this crap. It was the only joy I got from practicing family law. I sat on the jury of a man who was accused of very inappropriate behavior with children. He elected to testify in his own defenses, and his defense was, "I did it, but it was her idea." It was his third felony strike, so he'll be spending, with any luck, the rest of his life in prison. This wasn't court, but a live Portland traffic stop I was watching, and the guy told the officer, "I have caffeine pills in my back pocket," gets them out and puts them on the hood, and everyone's chill. The guy then just comes clean of its own accord and says it's Molly, and the officers look at each other and go, "Do we even have a test kit for that?" And the officer says, "No." The guy's face just shows he should have kept his mouth shut. Sitting waiting for my client, and the judge is giving a mass colloquy for an alternative program on a DUI. Basically probation. The question was, has anyone consumed alcohol or taken drugs in the last 24 hours? The obvious answer aside, one guy proudly raises his hand. "I did smack last night." He did not get probation. Police officers, have you ever had an all units call? And if so, what happened? I was doing a ride-along in college in a fairly small city in Georgia when we got an all available units call. The address came in, the lights and sirens went on, and we were hauling it at about 120 miles per hour across town. I had no idea where we were headed until we got there. The only thing the officer said to me was, "No matter what happens, stay in the frickin' car. If you see anyone with a gun, call it out on the radio like this." They showed me how. "If any of us get shot, call it in and stay in the car." Then he took a deep breath, calmly got out of the car, and took off at a sprint toward a 40-person melee in front of the only adult club in town. We were the first car there. Over the course of the next 30 seconds, officers arrived and kept coming until they outnumbered the people fighting. The officer I was riding with was completely on his own for a 10-second eternity and was able to rip about 10 people apart from fighting before backup arrived. It was the single bravest and most humbling thing I've ever seen with my own eyes. When it was all over, he got back in the car with 3 drunk and beaten up dudes in the back, turned to me and said, "So, when are you going to sign up?" 25 years ago, smallish rural town, my dad was a beat cop on patrol. My cat brings in a live mouse and was playing with it in the kitchen, and my mum is deathly afraid of rodents, so she calls dispatch and tells them my dad needs to come home. Dispatch gets on the line and tells my dad to switch to a secured line. There's an emergency at home. My dad's driving home to take care of the issue when all the cops on patrol in my small town, probably like 4, come with sirens and lights blazing to my house because they all heard there was an emergency at my dad's place. My mother was mortified. Years ago, a friend of mine was a dispatcher for the county. He covered sheriff, EMS, and fire communications, and also worked with communicating with other agencies as well. From the state troopers, he got some sort of text communication, not a phone text, this was before that was a thing, and it referred to an accident with injuries at the intersection of I-40 and Business 85. Something along the lines of, collision I-40 bus, 85 injuries involved. The way it was abbreviated and written made him misread it. Instead of an accident at 85 Business, he thought there was a bus collision on I-40 with 85 people injured. He dispatched every gosh darn fire truck and ambulance the county had, and they showed up, and it's a 2-car wreck with minor injuries. Former cop here. The all-units call was basically a riot at a large nightclub in a very rough area of the neighboring city. Once things were finally calmed down and a dozen or so people were taken away, my boss wanted us all back in our city. I was amazed at not only how many cops showed up, but from where. Counties and towns I'd never heard of before. I looked up a few at the end of the shift, and some came from an hour or more away. I don't know how large this large nightclub was, but evidently it was large enough to support half of the state's police personnel. How bad was the riot? Was someone there on his 5-star wanted level in GTA? More from me, the ride-along guy from the first story. This one was definitely weird for my small town. Someone called 911 and claimed that their house had been bombed. So naturally the fire department, police, and medical were all dispatched. We were among the first to arrive, and I got the same "stay in the car until I say it's okay" line before the officer left to see what was going on. Firemen were checking for fires and finding nothing, EMTs were checking for injuries and shock and finding nothing, and police were checking for mad bombers and finding nothing. From where I was sitting in the patrol car, I had a nice view of everything. The house was a nice old Mill Village-style house that sat on a corner about 10 feet off the road. Most of the house was completely untouched except for the front left of the house, which was missing a chunk out of the corner about 4.5 feet tall and about 2 to 3 feet wide, approximately 4 or 5 feet off the ground. It looked like someone threw a homemade grenade at the corner of the house, except there were no signs at all of charring from an explosion. The hole was deep enough that you could see light coming from inside the house to the outside. Now I've been sitting in the car for about 30 minutes, and the sun has set with dusk growing darker by the minute. I decide that since none of these people have blown up, it's probably safe for me to get out and take a look as well. I find my officer in the crowd and he's cool with me looking around and taking some photos, so I do. I stay out of the way for the most part and I'm looking through the grass like everyone else to find any signs of some explosive device when I almost step in a huge ant bed about 30 feet from the house in the front yard. I noticed 2 things. Someone has already disturbed the ant bed because it looks like there's a huge gash in it, and 2, there's nobody that seems teed off enough about setting in a large ant bed to have done it. Aha! A clue! I figured, find the guy with a ton of ant bites and we've got our bomber. So I start looking for footprints around the ant bed because the grass was kind of wet and maybe I watched too much NCIS. I stood in between the ant bed and the house and could make out a faint line along the grass made up of 1-foot-long dashes every 8 to 10 feet that led into the woods behind the house, across the street. I followed them to see where they went and they led to some train tracks and the trail went cold. I went back to the ant bed and used my hand to trace a line that would go roughly towards the corner of the house that was damaged. From the corner of the house, I looked across the street towards the neighbor's grass and woods and saw one long dash through the grass and a tree with a huge gash in it. I got my officer and told him I thought I had figured it out, and would he come with me to check. He grabbed a couple of other guys and we set off towards the tree with the gash, and sure enough, about 6 feet off the side of the tree was some kind of wheel or brake or something from a train that had come off at speed, rolled through the front yard, hit the ant bed and house and ricocheted off the house and across the street to hit a tree. For a while, I was known around the department and city manager's office as Detective Ride-Along. When my buddy was still a new cop, he worked in a larger city. They'd just gotten the shoulder mics, the ones every cop now has mounted up by their mouth so they can call in easier. When new to them, they wore the cord in the front of their shirts, and it was always in the darn way. And great handles when people wanted to wrestle the cops. Jimmy was called in one night to a bar brawl. He strolled into the bedlam and it was almost over. He was a rookie, always getting the crap detail, so he was becoming famous among his department for ruining his uniforms. To the point he was having to come out of pocket to replace them. He walked into a vet telling him to cuff everyone still here. They'll sort them out later. Jimmy grabs the closest guy and they struggle a little bit and go down to the ground. As they do, rip, Jimmy splits his pants, clean up the backside. Knowing he's going to be the butt of the jokes anyway, he turns his head to announce to the other officers, "Well, that's another uniform down," and keys his mic. Base hears uniform down, so does everyone else in the county. The radio explodes with chatter, but the 3 cops at the bar already have their hands full, so they turn down their radios, which was screw-up number 2. Base decides to roll everything with lights to the scene. Jimmy said they were glad of the help when the first few cars rolled up, but they just kept coming. He was known as Jack the Radio Ripper until he transferred. Minor reprimand, and he still had to pay for the pence. Man, I would never be cool enough to say, "Send everything with lights." So I interned at the local police department at a time when all stations received new radio devices. The new devices looked a bit like old cell phones and had a bright orange panic button on top. It was meant for situations where a single police officer was attacked and needed help. Pushing that button resulted in all communications on the standard Channel 1 being turned one-way communication only, so all units would listen to what's going on wherever the panic button was pressed, and an automatic all free units call. All other units had to switch to the much weaker Channel 2 to communicate, but Channel 2 only allowed one device to speak. So basically either dispatch or car 1 or car 2, etc. could talk, but not multiple people at the same time like on Channel 1. To disable the panic mode, you had to push the bright orange button in a certain way, think holding it for 3 seconds followed by 4 quick pushes, and it couldn't be done remotely. This happened in rather a large city where some police stations were closed at night. Usually the ones in the suburbs where few calls came in. That night, an older police officer closed down the remotest station in the suburbs and decided to shut off the radio devices. You guessed it, he pushed the panic button on top because he thought that's where the devices were turned on and off, without realizing what he'd done. He locked the station and went home. Since it was the first day of using the new radio devices, quite a few officers were unsure of how to turn to Channel 2. Basically, all communication was blocked. Cue panic everywhere with frantic cell phones to dispatch, and dispatch trying to figure out who closed the station so that panic mode could be disabled. And remember, they only had one key to open it. So this unintentional all units call turned into an actual no units can call, though quite a few units were busy trying to resolve the situation. Well, that's a whoopsie and a half. Sorry, entire city's police force, my finger slipped. Oh, and I couldn't call in to help resolve the situation because I went home to sleep. Former Royal Canadian Mounted Police here in a small tourist town was working on a regular mid-weekday shift when we received a dispatched call for a bomb threat in the industrial commercial sector of the town. We all went there, called in the bomb squad, the dogs, got people out of the area and so on. We were doing roadside when we got another call that the local bank's silent alarm was turned on. Now, we're in Canada, in a tourist town, things are usually relatively calm. But this was absolutely chaotic. We got the all-unit call, they call our neighboring detachment to help, we all split and head to the bank. We arrived, some 20-odd patrol cars all around, to see the bank employees bound and gagged, smoke everywhere from smoke bombs. We realized very quickly that the bomb threat was the diversion. We immediately got a bolo out to get the 3 males identified by the bank staff, including a former bank employee. We get the bolo out to CPIC, got words to airports and border crossings. We managed to catch 2 out of the 3 guys. The last one flew back to his home country. He had been in Canada on a student visa. We remained on high alert for days after this looking for the 3rd guy. Canadian authorities worked with their colleagues from the guy's country to get him extradited almost a year later. In the end, as I recall, about 130 grand was missing and never recovered. For most of us, it was the first time we had a bomb threat or a robbery. First time we were guarding an area expecting to be shot from an unknown location. The robbers were reported to have AK-looking weapons. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We usually get our all units call about once a month or so. We're taught that if you need backup, if crap is hitting the fan, call it in and worry about how many people come later. A unit was on patrol 2 weeks ago and some guy just started shooting at him. All the unit got out was 34th Street, 1033, I'm taking fire. 1033 being the code for send the cavalry or officer in need of assistance. It all ended fine, we caught the guy with no injuries, but you'd better believe every officer in our area dropped what they were doing and went. Another recent one was a mini riot breaking out at a candle vigil for a murder victim. An officer stepped in alone, bad move, to stop the fight, and started getting his butt handed to him. All he said was, "Padamic 1033, but it worked. We came in, dispersed the crowd, and got out." Also, good chance to rant about a pet peeve of mine. When a 1033 goes out, there's always a few units who block the air with useless chatter. Hold me responding, what's their location? Dispatcher, I'll come back to my current assignment later. Do they need a rifle on scene? It drives me crazy. Get off the radio and leave the air clear for the unit fighting for their lives. And every unit not on something absolutely necessary is required to respond. Why would you waste time to say you're going? No crap, you're going! There was an episode of This American Life where an officer accidentally locked himself in the back of his car when he went to take a nap. He left his radio in the front, so he called dispatch and was like, "Don't make this a big thing, just send one unit to me." And then dispatch proceeds to call the code for officer down, so then he heard a bunch of cars put on their sirens and race to him. I got run over by someone fleeing the scene of an incident that they weren't involved in. He just got scared and apparently had a gun on him. I was out of my car talking to the person who called and my partner was trying to stop the person who was really called on. So he didn't even see me get hit. No one knew I got hit or where I was because my radio went flying. Luckily there were a lot of witnesses who called 911 and found my radio. I confused the dispatcher because I was in so much shock that I came over the radio talking like I normally do, but I was bleeding badly from my head and broke my leg. I didn't feel the pain for about 2 hours, so I had that call come out because of me. I'm pretty sure a policy got made because of me too. What's the policy say? Don't move in front of a fleeing vehicle or threaten to shoot at one unless the occupant is firing at you with a gun. Apparently me yelling, "Stop the car" with my gun out while the car was accelerating down the street, going the wrong way, is what made him turn into me and hit me when I moved out of the way. Might not have been an all-units call, but the day my daughter went unresponsive after having a febrile seizure, the 911 dispatcher sent out unresponsive 2-year-old, and we had about 30 EMT, police, firefighters at our house in minutes. We live in a rural area, short distance from fire and ambulance hall, and everyone is a member EMT. Thankfully she was okay, but it was scary for us at the moment when her temperature wouldn't go down and then she passed out. As the story goes in Duluth, Maine, for a long time the radio signal that available officers could meet for Dunkin' Donuts was the code word "Broken Arrow." One day, a non-Duluthian was in the local newsroom when this was overheard. He got alarmed and told the rest of the newsroom that the code word likely meant that the police station was at that moment overwhelmed and outgunned, and they were calling all available units to help. Reporters rushed to the scene to find donuts. That code word is no longer used. In fairness, Broken Arrow does sound infinitely more ominous than a snack break. If I heard that code word, I would assume that stuff was going down. I mean, these kinds of call-outs happen all the time. Officers in a fight, possible subject with a firearm, major traffic accident. It's not anything like in the movies. If it's a big enough incident, all your available units are going to be going. I called 911 a couple of weeks ago because there was a couple involved in a domestic at a gas station, and I heard the phrase, "Give me the knife." Relayed all info I could to the dispatcher, and not even 5 minutes later, 2 village police units and 4 deputy sheriffs rolled up. Weapons out, yelling at the dude. I thought I was about to watch this guy get shot. This was probably around midnight. I wouldn't be surprised if those 4 deputies were all the units on duty that night. I work as a police communicator at a local university. Usually an all-units call is a fire alarm at one of the buildings. However, most of the time it's a false alarm and someone just burnt the popcorn at the lounge. One morning at work, we were evacuated from a rather large office building, 50 or more floors in New York City. Fire alarms went off on 3 floors because someone burned their popcorn in the microwave. That person will never live it down. I once got an all-unit call to my house. The backstory is that my mum was dating a crystal head and everyone knew who he was. They also knew our address. I was about 15 and one night he went off the rails and was beating the crap out of my mum. I got involved just in time to see him swing at my sister, who was 7 at the time. I ran for the phone and called it in. I got as far as the address when he grabbed me by the neck and threw me. Well, the dispatcher heard my garbled yelp and called it in as a possible homicide in progress. That, combined with his reputation, sent every single cop in the surrounding jurisdictions come flying our way. By the end of it, I think there were more than 20 police officers at our house. I ended up hitting him with my mum's cast iron skillet to keep him there, just as the first officer showed up. The officer was super cool about it and pretended he didn't see a thing. It was a terrible night and my mum was mad at me for months. But man, you don't mess with my little sister. Was a military police officer on a rather large base. I was getting off shift and being transported back to my barracks by the guys coming on shift so I could check in my weapon. Suddenly, we got a call for all units to respond to a section of base housing. A military wife was having an affair with another soldier while her husband was on deployment. Supposedly, the husband was due to return soon, so she tried to break it off with the other guy. He responded by stabbing her several times. My team leader and I searched the tree line with our weapons drawn because he was armed and it was dark outside, you know? I actually passed the guy with my team leader a few yards behind me, and suddenly the suspect comes out saying, "You're looking for me." It scared the crap out of me. My team leader covered him while I went in for the handcuffing, making sure that I had my knee firmly planted in between his shoulder blades and thoroughly covering his upper torso into the muddy terrain. Not sure what happened after that. He was taken to a holding cell by another squad and I got to go home. Ended up getting transferred from that base a few months later, but I know the wife survived the wounds. Too many examples. London riots, units attacked with a machete, large group fighting with knives, building fires, so on and so forth. I was at one of the lakefront beaches in Chicago a few summers ago when, according to news reports later, a party a quarter of a mile down the trail from us started getting out of hand. Apparently, the party got way overcrowded, so a pair of cops rolled up in a squad car to get the mariachi band to quit, in hopes of folks losing interest and dispersing. This was a no-go and the crowd responded by, among other things, breaking the squad car windows and surging in around the cops, one of whom put out an "oh crap" call. I don't know the details, but apparently Chicago cops have a code that basically means drop whatever you're doing and get the frick over here. Because within 90 seconds, Wilson Ave looked, I crap you not, like that epic car chase at the end of the Blues Brothers. If I had to guess, it must have been at least 50 cars hauling butt down onto the lakefront, one after the other. Like a high-speed parade of cop cars celebrating, "We're going to frick you up then arrest everybody" day. Which basically, it was. My father was a Port Authority Police Department officer for more than 30 years. 2 times he had all-unit calls. First was the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and the second was September 11, 2001. If he didn't pass away from an illness related to his time at the World Trade Center site in 2001, he'd be able to convey his impressions of that day better than I could. I recently found his handwritten notes from that night. They were jumbled together on his notepad and placemats from a diner in the area. The first and only cavalry charge I've seen was in Brooklyn. There was this ride on the W12 and Bowery and Coney Island in the late 80s called the Polar Express. You've all seen it. It's that ride that goes really fast around, then it goes backwards while blasting really loud music. Stupid, but whatever. This also attracted every broke bum in Brooklyn who couldn't afford to get into a club, or people who were thrown out of all of them, on weekends, and it was always a freaking nightmare. There were always fights, but you learned to let them tire themselves out a bit before you waded in because things could get ugly. I was detailed to this thing with a small army of other rookie cops on the 4th of July weekend. We were told in no uncertain terms not to go into the crowd. Ever. Nothing is happening in there that's worth your safety. So of course, a brawl breaks out and someone immediately goes running in. Now please understand, you have to go now. You can't leave the other guy alone even if he did mess up. The crowd parts for us like Moses parting the Red Sea, and then it closes on us and the airmail, rocks and bottles, come sailing. We're pretty much back to back like in the movie 300, but we're vastly outnumbered and out inebriated. We're fighting our way out and there's backup trying to fight its way in to get to us, but it's taking time, and I don't know if you've literally fought for your life, but it's freaking tiring. That adrenaline jolt only buys you so much time. Then I saw it, a flying wedge formation of mounted charging down West 12th into the crowd at full speed, with the sergeant in the middle with his nightstick held out like he was ordering a charge, and a crap-eating grin that said he'd waited his entire life to do this. I think the horse was smiling too. You'll hear the term crash a lot, and it's hyperbole. Not here. No, these guys crashed into this riot and sent bodies flying everywhere, like the bow of a great warship cutting through a stormy sea. A blue, black leather, and Rowan battleship. The crowd dispersed in about 3 minutes flat, equally as stunned by what they saw as honestly the foot cops were. I know sometimes people complain about the cost of maintaining mounted police units because they're seen as unnecessary backdrop for tourist photos, and oh my god, I'm living proof that they're so much more valuable than that. Heavy sleepers. What outrageous noises and events have you slept through? I've slept through numerous fire alarms and a tree falling into our house.
What the hell kind of alarm clock do you use if you can sleep through a fire alarm?
I sleep with my phone under my pillow directly under my head on full volume and vibrations, and I use a really loud and annoying electric guitar alarm. Sometimes it is unsuccessful. Not me, but a friend. He fell and took a nap in his seat at a rock concert. He first dozed off while Hymn was playing and slept all the way through Taking Back Sunday. He was stone cold sober, just tired apparently. Visiting an aunt when I was younger. I was taking a quick nap on her couch. While I was asleep, a power line went down across her front yard. Literally 30 feet outside the window I was sleeping next to. Multiple fire trucks, firemen coming through the house to make sure everything was okay inside, sirens, alarms, fire hoses, the works. I woke up after everything was over, confused why the carpet was dirty and the yard was burnt up. My boyfriend slept through thunder so loud it set off several car alarms in the parking garage right outside the window. When I was pregnant with my third baby, I woke up at midnight to the popping sound of my water breaking. I got up and went to the bathroom and confirmed that my water had in fact broken. Got a towel and went back to bed. Woke up at 5:30 in the morning with some big contractions and figured better go to the hospital. Went to the hospital dilated to 9 and the baby was born 20 minutes later. So, labor. I slept through my labor and transition. Highly recommend. I went slept through the process of my grandmother calling 911 for my grandfather, the ambulance coming to our house with sirens blaring, the process of him getting loaded into the ambulance and leaving. I woke up the next morning like, where did Grandpa go? I didn't even know why he had been taken to the hospital. I think it was a broken hip. A 6.8 magnitude earthquake while I was living near the Bay Area where it hit. Everyone else woke up because of the heavy rumbling, but I stayed asleep. Meanwhile, I'd wake up to someone walking in the hallway in the morning with my door shut. For the reference of those who don't have to deal with those pesky tremors in their life, 6.8 on the Richter scale is basically adjacent to the scale that can severely damage cities at a shallow enough depth. If you live in an older city or one without stringent building codes, buildings are going to come down at that magnitude. I once slept through a tornado that happened about a mile from my hotel. My girlfriend woke me up at 2 a.m. saying how scared she was of the storm and that the power went out and she was worried. I told her while half awake to leave me alone, I'll deal with it in the morning, and it's just thunder, I don't know why you're freaking out. She was fuming at me when I woke up the next morning and found out that a tornado destroyed a high school not too far away. Once a tornado formed on top of my house when I was younger. My mom screamed my name from downstairs several times, but it wasn't until my dad came up and literally grabbed me out of bed that I came down. I was so teed off at all of them for waking me up at the time. I'm quite thankful looking back on it, though. When I was about 6, I slept through our roof being torn off by a tornado. We were living in a remote area in a trailer on the construction site of our house. It peeled off and landed in a field down the road. My parents had to wake me up to go to a hotel. I wish I slept that soundly now. When I was 10, a huge thunderstorm brought the big oak in my yard crashing into the house. Luckily, my room was on the other side of the house, so it didn't get hit. I still slept. I woke up 10 minutes later because my cat jumped on the bed because the house was starting to flood. Good times. Not me, but my parents. They told me a story a while back about the time they stayed at a hotel in England for their friend's wedding in the mid-1990s. They stayed in room 1012. They went to bed as normal and sank into their usual deep sleep state. Upon entering the all-you-can-eat buffet breakfast in the hotel at 8 a.m. the next morning, they were approached by a similarly aged couple who proceeded to ask, "Oh my gosh, what do you think of last night?" My parents naively replied to the couple by saying, "Oh yes, Julie and Paul's wedding. It was amazing." The couple exchanged confused glances. "No, not the wedding reception." My parents were confused now. "All the commotion in room 1013, the room next door to you." The couple almost giggled as they expected this to prompt my parents. "What do you mean?" my dad asked as he naively continued to pile scrambled eggs onto his plate at the buffet. Turns out there was a massive substance bust in the hotel room next door to my parents. Armed police smashed in the door screaming, "Armed police, nobody move!" as like 10 police officers stormed the room. Multiple people arrested, one man tasered outside my parents' door, and a man screaming bloody murder as he was being cuffed. My parents didn't hear a thing. I once fell asleep at a Metallica concert in the middle of the show. Not a heavy sleeper, just exhausted. Now I wake up if the stars twinkle too loud. I slept so hard that my friends thought I was dead. They just kept shaking my non-responsive body. Why they did nothing about it is beyond me. God, my roommate once thought I'd legitimately died in my bed. I'd become completely nocturnal for a 3-day weekend, during which she kept going out to parties, and she just let me lie there. Literally told me she was going to give me until Monday and then call campus police. Like, what if I had died and started to smell? What? I missed a whole Saturday once in high school. I just got back from a band field trip where I didn't sleep much for 4 or 5 days, and I got home from the airport at about 3 a.m. on Friday and I passed out. I woke up and saw my clock said 6, looked out the window and I thought the sun was coming up, so I went back to sleep. I woke up a few hours later at 8 and it was dark outside. I was confused because it should be bright at 8 a.m. I came out and my mum was making breakfast for dinner, which also confused me, and she asked if I was ready for school tomorrow. I was like, no, it's Sunday tomorrow. As it turns out, I slept 36 hours straight through Saturday and woke up Sunday night, thinking it was Saturday morning. It's still my record for the most hours slept.
I slept for 30 hours too once. It was on a Thursday and I woke up at around 12 and was freaking out. Came into the kitchen and started packing my school bag, and my parents were just like, "What are you doing?" "Packing my school bag so I can make it to the last lessons at least."
And they say, "But it's Saturday."
"How?" "Well, we couldn't wake you, so we let you sleep."
I slept through a fire drill at college once when I was really hungover. I wasn't hungover, I was solidly drunk, but same.
I've slept through several because they'd happen all the time because of stupid people.
Growing up, we had an indoor cat. Usually, we let him out in the summer, but usually not for too long. One day, we forgot him outside. Around 2 a.m., he was crying at the door to be let in. My brother and parents heard it, but were mostly asleep. Soon after, another cat showed up and the two started fighting on our doorstep. If you're not aware, cat fights get very loud. My brother, who was in high school at the time, jumped out of bed shouting, "It's Kitty!" Our cat's name was Kitty. My brother ran out to help Kitty, followed by my parents. When my brother opened the door, Kitty jumped inside, but my brother didn't notice. The other cat started to run away. The other cat looked very similar to Kitty. So at 2 a.m., my brother was running down the street in his boxers, chasing the neighbor's cat while yelling, "Kitty, come back!" My parents were chasing my brother while yelling, "That's not Kitty!" And I slept through the whole thing. Someone opening my front door, walking in, taking all my crap and leaving without a hitch. It really sucked, but at least he took my school bag as well, so I had a great excuse to not have any homework done the next day.
Oh mate, this sucks so bad and it happens a lot. People walk into bedrooms and grab car keys from nightstands and leave in the car parked in the drive. Very common occurrence here in Australia.
I don't know why this would be more common in Australia of all places, but I too have woken up to the realization that someone has just wandered into my house in the middle of the night, and it is damn scary. I slapped my girlfriend in my sleep. She responded with a massive slap without even thinking because she doesn't take crap from anyone. I didn't wake up. She also apologized after. My brother used to kick real bad in his sleep, and when we were kids we had to share a bed for a while, being dirt poor, and just having a caravan to sleep in. Well, he kicked obviously, and we would kick him so hard back, but he wouldn't even stir, just a really heavy sleeper. I feel terrible now for how hard I kicked him, not like he knew what he was doing. I fell asleep in my dorm room while in college. I lived alone. They had a fire drill at 3 a.m. The firefighters came, opened each room and checked on us. The fire alarm didn't wake me. They tried to shake me awake, nothing. So they called in an ambulance. These guys got a stretcher, loaded me up onto it and started taking me down 3 flights of stairs. Once we were on the 4th flight of stairs, I woke up and tried to jump off the stretcher. Because, well, I thought I was being kidnapped. The ambulance guys still tried to get me to go to hospital because they thought I was on substances because I didn't wake up. The truth of the matter is, that's just the way I sleep. I have 5 different alarm clocks set to wake me up, but sometimes I still don't hear them while asleep. None of my doctors know what to do about it other than tell me to buy more alarm clocks. This affects my jobs badly. I hate it. I had to get one of those alarm clocks for deaf people. The one I bought is a sonic boom. It also plays one of those super shaking bed vibrating units that you can put under your pillow that vibrates. It also has a plug for a lamp, so when the alarm goes off, the lamp flashes on and off. It helped a lot for the first years, but now I've got used to it, so I need to change it up. I used to have an alarm app that made you do a memory matching quiz to turn it off, and every time you messed up the alarm, it got louder. Over the course of the year, I got good enough at opening my eyes, doing the memory quiz, and then going right back to sleep without remembering any of it. I fell asleep next to a speaker at a party. No alcohol involved. I've got a mate who used to take disco naps near the bass bins at raves. Absolute mad lad. Could sleep through the apocalypse. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I slept through a pretty decent-sized earthquake. Not a little rattle, big enough that everything on the walls ended up on the floor. Slept through my neighbor shooting her boyfriend. Slept through the police and ambulance sirens. Slept through the cops knocking on my door to ask if we heard anything. This was in Camara, Wyoming in the early 80s. My kid's barfing in the middle of the night, and I'm instantly up. Exactly. Actual tornado, nap time. Kid saying, "Mom, blah." I'm up. Right? Why is the sound of pre-vomit cough able to rouse you from the most dense of sleep? Or pee hitting the floor and not going in the toilet? I have two boys who I've both caught peeing in the hall outside the toilet. I was about 12 at the time, camping with the family, and I woke up one morning with this large, painful, swelling bump that was obviously some kind of insect bite, but very obviously not a mosquito bite. I had plenty of those already at that point in the trip. My parents checked my tent and found a tarantula with dozens of little babies on it. Oh, hell no. Where were you camping at? Some state or national park in Kentucky or southern Indiana. Someone threw a Molotov cocktail through the window of a business under my apartment. Set the building on fire, fire crew, sirens, everything right out front. Read about it in the news that afternoon after leaving out the back. I slept through the whole thing. My family owns a beach cabin on the west coast and decided to have a family vacation there for a week. We didn't realize how big the entire family was, so all the parents decided to rent the neighbor's cabin so they could sleep in one, while the cousins could all sleep in the other. Since there weren't enough beds for all the cousins, I just slept in a sleeping bag on the floor. Apparently, in the middle of the night, my younger cousin fell off her bed and landed on me, causing a very loud thud. The parents heard it from the next door, rushed into the house, and my cousins and I were still sound asleep. I didn't even know it happened until the next day. I was on a safari camping trip in Namibia with my dad and his wife. I'm not usually a heavy sleeper, but we were off at a campsite that had a bar. Hell yeah! And I'd had a bit to drink. It was a long day and I was tired and a bit drunk, so I went back to my tent early. When I woke the next morning, both my dad and our guide started asking me if I was okay and telling me how brave I was. I'm sitting there thinking, of course I'm okay? I mean, it was too hot for my liking, but it was just as hot for everyone else too, so I can't imagine how that makes me brave. They explained to me that an elephant came to our campsite during the night and began to use my tent as a scratching post. I was a wrong step or two away from being crushed to death and had absolutely no idea. They assumed I was still awake, but I slept through the entire ordeal. My dad was losing his mind trying to do something, and our guide and the person who ran the campsite spent an hour or so trying to lure this elephant away from my tent. I guess eventually it just got bored and walked away. I'd actually thought they were just pranking me or something, but we were staying there a couple of nights, and that next night an elephant, maybe the same one, I don't know, came in and was walking around the campsites again. Honestly, glad I slept through it because I would have been crapping myself. I continued sleeping after falling from my bunk bed. The lower bed is wider, queen size I think. I'm sleeping on the top bunk and I fell, but I didn't wake up. My sister from the lower bed was woken up by the crash, as were my parents in the other room. When she was in her 20s, my now wife would sometimes fall asleep when she was out partying in the club. Like in one of those unbelievably loud dance clubs that people go to all night with VIP tables and a DJ, where if you actually want to talk to someone you need to bring your mouth right up to their ear and yell while they jam their finger in the opposite ear. It would be about 3 a.m. and she'd sneak off from the group and find a banquet or lounge chair or something and just go to sleep. Makes me feel really insulted when she complains now about my snoring today. I'm like, really? My snoring is too much. But house music periodically interrupted by the DJ blasting a foghorn is okay. I hate clubs like that. Thankfully, she grew out of them. It is funny that someone can be kept awake by the basic human function of breathing, albeit with interruptions, but can apparently get some deep sleep feet away from a booming speaker. Silly humans. Not me, but my brother. Sleeps through nearly anything. The most memorable to me is him falling off the top bunk. I was on the bottom bunk and he made the loudest crash ever, followed by snoring. I'm a pretty heavy sleeper, but I haven't had anything happen to me. My mum, on the other hand, had someone bring a serenade to her place and she slept right through it. My grandmother, who is typically not a heavy sleeper, slept through Hurricane Laura, and we were directly in its path 50 miles from the coast. It's been over a month and she's still upset and confused, just saying,
I can't believe I slept through that storm.
I slept through Hurricane Opal when I was a teenager. Several trees fell in the yard and throughout the neighborhood. Mom and brother stayed up all night freaking out while I slept like a rock. In college, a cop came into our common area because the roommates were being rowdy. He apparently knocked on my door for 10 minutes before giving up. The roommates thought I was just hiding in there acting asleep. I was legitimately passed the frick out, and the next morning I had no idea anything had happened. They all got written up though. Ha! I almost slept through the LA earthquake in 1992. I was at a friend's house for a sleepover with about 5 other kids. We were sleeping in the living room. Apparently, when the shaking started, I rolled all the way to the kitchen, was woken up by his mum freaking out and trying to get me out of the house. No one could believe that I could stay asleep during all that shaking and noise. When I worked at the coachwork part of an automobile factory, a colleague fell asleep in a bin of steel sheets and didn't even wake up when the manager pulled the emergency alarm for the entire building, thinking that he was seriously injured. And trust me, that place was loud. Slept through a dorm fire alarm and knocks and bangs on the door, countless alarm clocks, and landing while a passenger on a plane. I regularly get woken up by my partner's snoring, though. My ex kicked me off the bed. I slept through the alarm and she was trying to wake me up. Well, too bad. I didn't wake up to that and just turned on the floor to my side. I was told that I missed my bus after I woke up confused on the floor. As an extra, I slept through a party at my friend's cottage. They didn't try to be quiet and apparently I got a lap dance. A bit bummed to have missed it, but everyone refused to tell who gave it. So I'm a bit uncertain of whether I should feel relieved or bummed out. Slept through a magnitude 5 earthquake. My mum told me about it after I woke up, probably hours after it happened. I slept through a suspected crystal head trying to break into my house. I live in a fairly decent area of my city. I say fairly decent because there are mostly families and few golden-aged households, as well as some crystal heads that live on my block, where there's a huge Catholic church on the corner. My boyfriend was over the other day and he woke me up from a nap apologizing for snapping on my neighbor because she had just tried breaking into my house. Luckily, he was awake because he ran outside after she tried to get away and yelled at her that she'll regret it if she tried that again. But she was so high he doesn't think that the message registered too well with her. I can't believe I didn't hear all the commotion, but I hope she doesn't try that again. So my stepdad was in the military before he married my mum, and while he was in the military, there was an attack on the base that he was at. I don't know the name of the base because I don't remember what he said. Sorry, Reddit. But apparently from what he said, I'd slept through the entire attack. Now I don't know if he was just pulling my leg or not, because he's a really heavy sleeper. Like for example, one time our cat Mittens had been jumping around and had pushed over a glass vase in the living room. My stepdad was sleeping in the living room at the time, and it woke up everyone in the house except for him. So I don't know if this is a real story or not, but I thought I should share this with you anyway. I grew up in quite a noisy neighborhood. I learned to sleep through everything. One day I'd gone to bed early and had fallen asleep really quickly. I woke up finally when I smelled something burning. I shot up thinking my house was on fire, something that had already happened once, and the trauma was what woke me up and what kept me up. I looked out my window to see 4 cars on fire, 2 fire trucks and about 10 police cars and the ambulance. My mum was at work, so I didn't know what happened until the next day. 2 people had died in the car crash and subsequent fire. I slept through the noise, apparently. One morning I woke up, got breakfast, and was casually informed by my roommate that our downstairs neighbor's crazy ex came by and shot at him through his door while I was asleep. So not only did I sleep through a shooting, I also slept through the sirens of the cop cars, the arrest, and my roommate giving his eyewitness account to the cops. That's the morning I learned that I will die in my sleep, just not of natural causes. My neighbor's murder on the sidewalk in front of our house. He was shot multiple times. I'd drunk NyQuil, so it knocked me out. Let's see, an earthquake, very, very small, severe thunderstorms, and one time a tree fell in my backyard and landed next to my bedroom window. Now, I did wake up, but barely. It was like half awake and I immediately went back to sleep without registering anything. Massive thunderstorm. Apparently lightning struck 200 feet from the house and sounded like a bomb going off. I woke up as if nothing had happened. My car was broken into. Our neighbor called, via the landline, this was a while back, and my roommate woke up and picked up the phone. My roommate ran outside, restrained the robber, and called the cops. The cops showed up and investigated and took statements. This was the hours between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. Then, I woke up and went downstairs to see the last cop car drive away. If I didn't see the last car, I probably wouldn't have believed him when he told me the story. A plant explosion that could be heard and felt for a 25-mile radius. It woke my boyfriend and dog up in the middle of the night, but I had no idea anything happened until I checked the news in the morning. What were the most ridiculous demands or rules from your controlling partner?
I applied and got accepted into a school far away from him. Once he found out about it, he demanded I fill out his application and write his essays so he could come with me. I did not. I had a guy freak out when I got accepted to college even though it was in the same city. That's why you don't date unemployed 21-year-olds when you're 17, even if they can buy alcohol. He was expecting me to pop out babies and move into his mum's house. I was just like, ha, nope, bye. I was engaged to a man who had to approve each meal, and I wasn't allowed to eat if he wasn't present. He bought my clothes, and he always brought them 2 sizes too small, so I felt pressured to fit into them. I left him for a chef. That is crazy. Good on you for going for the chef.
Crazy and controlling guys are so weird about food. One guy I dated was obsessed with me going out, as in, he thought I shouldn't eat out ever. I had a routine set up where I would head over to my friend's house after work on Friday night. We'd smoke, go eat Mexican food, and then he just showed up there randomly one Friday just as we were about to leave and tried to give me leftovers from like 4 days ago to eat instead of eating delicious Mexican food. I told him to F right off, and my friends made fun of him relentlessly. The next day, I told him we were better off as friends. He cried and tried to bargain and say that he would ease up on the eating out thing. I did not agree to that bargain. Oh, you know, just your run-of-the-mill OAG stuff. She demanded to snoop through not only my phone, but my physical items as well. When I wasn't with her, she demanded to know what I was doing and who I was with, and even went as far as to make me take pictures of what I was doing. She even made me give her my Reddit account to make sure I wasn't PMing girls on here. What truly takes the cake was when she accused me of cheating because she found a half-eaten Pop-Tart in my car. My friend borrowed my car and had forgotten it. She saw the Pop-Tart and demanded to know who it belonged to, or it was over. In short, was accused of cheating because of a rogue Pop-Tart.
People like this, her, are usually cheating themselves. I dated a guy in high school who exhibited a lot of these behaviors. One time I was on the bus on the way to work and he called me freaking out because he had driven to my school to pick me up unannounced, but since I'd already left, I wasn't there. He was insisting that I was in a guy friend's car and that I'd left early deliberately to avoid him. What the frick? The same guy also offered to build me a PC. This was in the early 2000s and got upset when I refused to let him install remote access, so he could check up on my system and log into my accounts whenever he wanted. Ugh.
Yuck. Good save on the remote access thing. If they made it sound innocent enough to just be checking up on updates and things, I can see some people letting them install that software and being completely at his digital mercy.
If you don't have anything to hide, why don't you show me?
Run away if you hear that. One time I left a class where we were assigned a group project in college. I met with my group immediately after for about half an hour. About 20 calls and 40 texts. Like she thought I was effing a stranger in the middle of the day? I'd get a call about twice a week from her freaking out because she thought someone put anthrax in her food. She broke 2 of my cell phones. The worst thing was in arguments, when she stood in front of the door and wouldn't move, stopping me from leaving. I couldn't move her because she'd say I hit her or something. That's the only woman I've ever called the C word, and I don't regret it whatsoever, because that's what she was. I was doing laundry at my mum's about 10 minutes down the road where there's no cell service. I came back to a torrent of paranoid manic texts just as she was peeling out of our apartment. Accused me of cheating on her, sleeping with a girl at work, who was a lesbian by the way, setting up fake Facebook accounts to bang my ex, you get the picture. After some weeks of this bullcrap, she introduced me to some guy she knew from high school while we were out at the bar. Mind you, I did this once, introduced her to an old friend who was dating one of my best bros. She accused me of doing the deed with her. Anyway, I came back to the apartment to find her and this guy watching a movie. She acted like it was no big deal and told me to give them space. That cued a visit to my landlady downstairs. I explained what was up. She was very kind and understanding. I always paid my half on time and helped her out around the property, so she let me forfeit my security deposit and break the lease. Since my ex was always such a cold witch to my landlady, who was a nice single mum with a nice rack, she got a whole slew of lease-breaking claims brought down on the crazy witch because my landlady had been cheated on before and felt bad for me, called collections, etc. Now the psycho is living with her mum, got knocked up by her new landscaper substance-using boyfriend, and is going for the DUI hat trick. You're not allowed to do the hard Sudokus unless you can solve the medium ones in 5 minutes. Why are you controlling my puzzle-solving habits? That guy was weird.
That almost sounds like he was trying to be funny.
Right after my first year of college, and she was still in high school, I joined the local volunteer fire department. She told me she didn't want me doing CPR on women because I would see their chests. Yes, everyone knows that old ladies who've fallen and can't get up have fantastic wrecks. If we weren't together physically, we had to be in constant communication. I was required to call him immediately at the end of my workday and talk to him for the duration of my 1-hour commute home. If I took too long to call, he would call me and berate me. Once I finally got home, I was allowed to take a break for dinner before chatting with him online. Absolutely exhausting. My ex told me that I wasn't allowed to look at other women. I don't mean I wasn't allowed to stare at or ogle attractive women. I mean that my field of vision wasn't allowed to contain anyone with a uterus. At work, out and about, sometimes even on the fricking TV, if she'd decided that I was looking at any woman that wasn't her at any time, I'd be in for it. I had a similar rule from a girlfriend. TV people were allowed though. That year, MTV Spring Break aired for the first time and I wasn't allowed to watch after the first episode, because apparently those weren't real TV people, just whores who happened to be on TV. I could go on for pages about her. It ended extremely badly for me. In high school, I had a controlling ex-girlfriend who would demand I talk to her for 5 to 7 hours a day, and if I didn't, I would get texts from her trying to self-delete constantly. Yeah, that was not a fun time. 0 out of 10 would not go through again.
Sometimes I'm glad cell phones weren't super popular until the end or just after my years in high school. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 18. It was easier back then to have boundaries instead of being tethered to someone 24/7. I had a boyfriend who felt I should be responsible for his emotional well-being. I believe at one point he actually said, "I'm feeling like crap and it's your fault, so you should be the one to fix it." I think that might have been after I moved out due to his behavior. Emotional IQ of a toddler, that one. My ex cut the cord of the TV and he only put it back on when he was home. I was home alone with 2 little kids all day and I was chemo sick. Also, when I made dinner, I wasn't allowed to tell him when it was ready because he said I was not going to tell him when it's time to eat. Another time I got beat for taking off my wedding bands when I made meatloaf. The meat would get caught in my rings. Needless to say, I took my kids and walked away from him, our house, and everything I owned. F him. I dearly hope that you never saw that person again, author. Imagine forfeiting a hot, fresh dinner because it hurts your ego to be told dinner is ready. I wonder if he was the same way with waiters. He didn't want me talking to any males, even family members. Not even a simple hello with a friendly smile because this was me flirting with them. And if a guy spoke to me first, then he was flirting with me. The guy tried to make me lose my job because I'm surrounded by men all day and he didn't like that. He'd basically tell me what to do with my life, changes I needed to make, which were stupid things like me wearing makeup because I wanted to, but if I tried to tell him he needed to quit drinking, he was an alcoholic, and skipping work because of hangovers from drinking, then I was controlling and needed to stop trying to change who he is. He didn't want me wearing skirts or shirts that showed any cleave, pretty hard with my large chest by the way, because then men would stare, and by the way, they weren't staring. I couldn't wear makeup on any normal day, especially if I was going somewhere without him. Because I was trying to look good for someone else? No matter how many times I explained makeup is a hobby and I do it for myself, not to look good for anyone else, not even him. Speaking of makeup, he would yell at me if I even bought a $3 lipstick because it's a waste of money. And then he'd spend a ton on beer. He'd even make me buy the beer when he didn't want to because I make more than him and he needed to save, but would spend all of his money in beer and cigarettes when he made me broke. He even made me buy multiple controllers and gaming headphones because it was my fault when he broke them when mad because of Call of Duty Online. All I'd do is say maybe he should stop playing because he was getting worked up. Probably worst of all was he didn't want me spending time and playing with my 6-year-old brother who I adore. I ignored that and even let my bro in the bedroom with me, which would make my ex extremely mad. I was a university tour guide, a position she tried and failed to get. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. However, when I had to go to a mandatory training or, I don't know, give a tour, I obviously needed to tell her where I was going since she always needed a good reason for me to be anywhere but with her. So I'd have to say, I have something to do, and she'd ask what, and I'd say something vague, because, I couldn't talk about it. So she'd press more, getting very angry and upset that I was being vague. So I'd be less vague, and she'd get more upset. So I admit that it was for training for my job, and then she gets furious that I talked about it and taunted that she didn't have the job.
led to quite a lot of shouting and crying in the library.
Holy crap! Talk about a catch-22. What a lunatic.
It was the worst, especially with this detail. I tried out for tour guide in my freshman year and I made the first 2 cuts, but not the final one. Her and I started dating sophomore year and I went back for it and suddenly she was all interested in being a tour guide too. So this time I managed to get the job and she does like I did and made the first 2 cuts but not the final. When she found out that she didn't make it, she didn't talk to anyone for about 2 days. And from that point on, she'd always go on about how I couldn't imagine what it feels like to not make the cut. Blah, blah, blah. B-word, the same thing happened to me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I mean, there were a lot from my ex-husband. I was severely depressed and tried to self-delete a few times, and he wouldn't make money available for therapy even though he was unemployed, he was still in control of the finances. He just kept saying I wouldn't need therapy if I just listened to him. He also had rules that changed frequently about how many slices of cheese or meat I was allowed to put on my sandwiches. He also used to have a rule that I wasn't allowed to drink coffee because, his words, he didn't want me to be engaged in an addiction that he didn't share with me. Smoking and drinking were okay, apparently. He also used to scout friends for me and bring them home and expect me to just be friends with them. And if it didn't click for either of us, he would yell at me for screwing up. I wasn't allowed to write anything like stories or poetry and then refuse to let him read it. And I wasn't allowed to listen to any of my favorite music. If I put on any of my favorite music on my iPod, he would take my iPod at night and replace it with music he approved of. After we divorced, I learned he actually liked some of the same bands I did but refused to let me listen because he didn't want me to have my own thing. He felt that drove me away from him. Again, his words. I wasn't allowed to wear any clothes that made my chest look weird, which seemed to be an entirely arbitrary qualification that changed from day to day. I couldn't keep up and often had to throw out clothes that I really liked because they didn't meet his specific needs when it came to having to look at me. It's been 7 years since I left his sorry butt, and I'm still afraid of posting this, and that some of you are going to tell me how justified he was. He really had me believing that he was the king of the fricking universe and he was right about everything. I still have nightmares about everyone in my life turning on me and saying he actually was right all along. Oh, and I forgot the actual best part. I wasn't allowed to sleep. He was an insomniac and would get angry and jealous when I slept 8 hours a night. I'd go to bed and he'd spend 3 or 4 hours working himself into a rage over it, then he'd pound on the bedroom door, slam it open, turn on the lights and start screaming at me. This happened at least once a week for almost 10 years. I still get nervous when I go to bed by myself at night. I had to ask permission to go to the mall by myself. I wasn't allowed to go to the gym as it meant I was making myself look better for other people. I also wasn't allowed to change my password on my laptop as it meant I had something to hide. Boy, was that a fun relationship. Oh my god, I can't even imagine sticking around after the first one of those restrictions came up. Imagine just wanting to keep your partner indoors, getting out of shape and doing nothing with their life. And why would you want to date that if you were said controlling spouse? My ex got angry if we were in the car together and I looked outside the window at scenery. Apparently, I was checking out other guys. This also applied to other cars. I wasn't allowed to look out the window and compare his car to theirs because this was seen as a betrayal. In the shopping center or mall, I could only look at the floor because then I would be accused of checking out other guys, again. There were many other things, but when I got into a new relationship, my new boyfriend was surprised when I asked, "Am I allowed to look out the window?" Looking confused, he said, "Of course, why wouldn't you?" I then realized how socially conditioned my ex made me, and I'm still trying to undo the damaging behaviors I learned. I love this because I can totally relate. My ex used to go fricking bonkers if there was a dish in the sink. It could have been a fricking spoon that he made dirty, and if I didn't clean it, he wouldn't speak to me, or he'd yell. A couple of weeks ago, I found some mold in the sink. My husband and I have a very long commute with only enough time left at the end of the day for a meal and a shower, so things don't get cleaned as often as they should, and I was afraid to tell him about the mold. I sheepishly said, I found some mold in the sink. His response? Yucky. What did I do? I squeezed him harder than I thought I could. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm only including a small portion of what I experienced, but it was a living hell for the 2 years. I wasn't allowed to talk to my best friend about anything serious. It had to be him I spoke to. I couldn't wear floral print. When I didn't lose 30 kilos, I managed 10 in a month. He said I wasn't trying hard enough. He told me he wanted a break for a year, I should move on, focus on myself and find someone else. When he found out that I'd moved on, 4 months later, he showed up at my door and asked to talk, where he ran me into the ground. I've never been more upset before. I really felt like I'd done something wrong when I'd done everything he'd asked. Poster child of narcissistic personality disorder. Wait a minute, 10 kilos in 1 month, and he wanted you to lose 30? That translates to about 20 to 60 US pounds if I'm understanding it right. The maximum healthy weight that's normal for 1 month is about 10 pounds or 5 kgs. So if I read that right and my math is right, the only way to lose 30 kilos in 1 month is to cut off your leg. I was dating this girl a while ago, I'm also a girl by the way, who would get upset when I would wear dresses and skirts because I looked more femme than her, and she didn't want people to think she was the guy in our relationship. A year and a half after our breakup, and I have more than 15 dresses in my closet that I rotate through every day, and she can go F herself. I had a good friend with a controlling boyfriend who didn't want her wearing skirts and dresses either. He compromised by letting her wear them with shorts underneath if they were appropriate enough by his standards. One day, she and I went to the mall together and she had on a cute dress. We had a nice little day together, then we went back to her place. When we walked up to the door, the first thing her now ex-boyfriend did was march over, give her a disgusted look, and pull up her dress right in front of me to make sure she had shorts on underneath. It was really sad. Oh boy, my time to shine. I was required each night to inform her of the time I would be getting up the next morning. If I was not up, she would message all of my friends asking what happened to me. I would occasionally be required to make wake-up calls to her as she didn't like any of her phone alarms. She forbid me from messaging my ex, who had recently come out as lesbian. She thought I would try to get her to come back to me. I was forbidden from voicing my opinion about a coworker of hers who she had been in a relationship with previously. I had to give an explanation and an apology if I ever stopped texting her for some reason. Some examples include brushing my teeth, eating, walking the dog, picking up friends or family members if they needed a ride somewhere. She was a non-stop texter even when she was driving. I wasn't allowed to be upset by this even though I made it clear that an ex-friend killed someone texting and driving. I wasn't allowed to make plans on the fly. Everything needed to be scheduled days in advance, even with other friends. When I broke up with her, she threatened to have her sister and her sister's boyfriend beat the crap out of me to get me to stay. When I refused to give in and continued to try to break up with her, she threatened to self-delete. Anytime I spoke to a female friend of mine, I was under suspicion of being a cheater, and she demanded that I let her inspect my phone. She was not happy when she learned that I watched adult content and demanded to know the genre that I watched. She said she was in love with me after a month in and was upset when I didn't reciprocate. She threatened to go back to her coworker unless I declared my love for her then and there. She prank called me to break up with me on several occasions and then got mad at me for being teed off. Doing the same thing to her was forbidden. I lasted 2 months. I was a bit whipped, honestly. There's kind of a TV sitcom trope of the hilarious whipped boyfriend, and I have just realized how objectively horrifying some of those relationships would be if focused on for any amount of time. 2 months of this sounds like hell. The most ridiculous demand? Probably that I couldn't sleep until she did because she wanted to talk to me, despite me normally going to sleep before 12 and her frequently staying up till 3 or 4 a.m. If I insisted on going to sleep, she would get mad. If I then caved and told her, okay, I'll talk to you, she would keep on hammering about the fact that I would go to sleep without talking to her. There were many, many other ridiculous demands and reasons she got angry, but that one stood out. Fortunately, she's an ex now. My first girlfriend had a huge body issue about the size of her chest. They were small and perky and I liked them, plus she had an hourglass figure and a wonderful butt. Anyway, she'd freak out if we watched a movie together and there was a busty girl on the screen. She'd often even physically cover my eyes with her hand, even in a movie theater. If we were walking on the street and a busty girl walked past, she'd be staring at me with a death glare to see if I even glanced towards her. Her little sister had a larger bust than her, so she was constantly insanely paranoid that I was secretly lusting after her 14-year-old sister. It was just a trip to the Twilight Zone. This was like 15 years ago, so I don't remember all the details anymore. I think at some point, when we were just flirting and not together yet, she asked what kind of girls I liked, and I said something about curves. Perhaps that somehow triggered her insane uncertainty, but I didn't even mean bust size with it. You know, all curves. I explained that to her several times later on, but she insisted I was lying in an attempt to cover my tracks. She demanded I never tickle my pickle ever. This is despite us hardly seeing each other, so the opportunity to release was minuscule. But hey, I was under the thumb. It did give me my first and only wet dream though. Well, you're asking about ridiculous. He demanded that I should answer him anytime he calls, even if I was asleep. Not call him back when I wake up. Also, I had a set of 10 rings on one finger, which he demanded to have the one I liked the most, and was like, "Do you prefer material things over me?" That I not wear shorts around males even during summer when I was playing sports, because he didn't want guys looking at my butt and having thoughts about me. Meanwhile, he changed his Facebook profile picture to one of him standing in a boat, facing away from the camera, fully in the buck to show off his butt tattoo. His reason was, "Yeah, but I'm a guy, so it's different. I've never had such a wonderfully relieving breakup."